To understand the Aeldari is to comprehend a legacy that spans millions of years, a civilization whose rise and fall shaped the very fabric of the galaxy. Their story begins not with their own ambitions, but as pawns in a conflict of such magnitude that it forever altered the course of galactic history. The Aeldari trace their genesis to the period known as the War in Heaven, a cataclysmic conflict that erupted approximately 65 million years ago between the Old Ones and the Necrontyr. The Old Ones, ancient beings of immense psychic power and technological sophistication, faced extinction at the hands of the bitter Necrontyr and their new allies, the star-eating entities known as the Khatan. In their desperation, the Old Ones created several warrior races to combat this existential threat, with the Aeldari among their most successful creations. Engineered with an innate connection to the psychic realm of the warp, the Aeldari possessed natural psychic abilities that far surpassed most other sentient species. Their genetic makeup included enhanced reflexes, heightened senses, and extraordinary longevity, gifts bestowed by the Old Ones to create the perfect warriors against the soulless Necrontyr and their Khatan masters. The Aeldari's minds were designed to channel the energies of the warp with precision and control, making them living weapons in this ancient conflict. Though the War in Heaven ultimately led to the downfall of the Old Ones, the Aeldari survived the carnage. As the Necrontyr transformed into the soulless Necrons through biotransference, and eventually retreated into their stasis tombs for a great sleep that would last 60 million years, the galaxy lay open before the young Aeldari race. With their creators gone and their greatest enemies dormant, the Aeldari found themselves inheritors of a galaxy rich with opportunity. The ascension of the Aeldari Empire did not occur immediately. For thousands of years after the War in Heaven, they developed their society and technology, expanding cautiously from their core worlds. By approximately 30 million years ago, the Aeldari had established dominion over significant portions of the galaxy, their webway technology allowing them to expand far beyond the limitations faced by younger races dependent on warp travel. At its zenith, the Aeldari Empire spanned thousands of worlds, from the galactic core to the eastern fringe. Their dominion was uncontested, with no other species possessing the technological capability or numerical strength to challenge their supremacy. Unlike the brutal conquests of the later Imperium of Man, the Aeldari expansion often occurred through settlement of uninhabited worlds or the gradual assimilation of less advanced species into their sphere of influence. The technological achievements of the Aeldari at their height bordered on the miraculous by the standards of younger races. Central to their civilization was the webway, a labyrinthine dimension existing between real space and the warp. This vast network of tunnels and pathways was constructed using technologies and understanding now lost, allowing instantaneous travel between distant points in the galaxy without the dangers of warp travel. The webway's arterial passages were large enough to accommodate massive spacecraft, while smaller capillary routes allowed individual travelers to move between worlds in the blink of an eye. The material foundations of Aeldari technology centered around psycho-reactive substances, chief among them wraithbone. This psychically conductive material responded to Aeldari thought patterns, could be grown rather than manufactured, and possessed strength beyond the most advanced composites developed by other races. Wraithbone formed the skeleton of their graceful spacecraft, the foundations of their cities, and the framework of their most sophisticated devices. Unlike the crude, mechanical technologies of younger races, Aeldari technology blended the material and the psychic in perfect harmony. The Aeldari mastered matter manipulation at its most fundamental level. Their artisans could shape reality through thought alone, creating structures and artifacts of breathtaking beauty and functionality. Psychoplastic, a material that could be reshaped through concentrated thought, allowed for cities that could be reconfigured according to aesthetic whim or practical necessity. Gravity manipulation technologies permitted the construction of impossible architectures, floating spires, inverted pyramids, and crystalline structures that defied conventional physics. Their weapons technology demonstrated similar sophistication. Shuriken weapons fired molecularly thin discs capable of slicing through the heaviest armor. Distortion weapons created localized warp rifts that could tear apart matter at the subatomic level. decannons, monofilament weapons, and plasma devices of unparalleled efficiency formed the backbone of Aeldari military technology, allowing relatively small forces to defeat enemies many times their number. Perhaps most impressive was their mastery of the soul itself. The Infinity Circuit, a psychic network embedded within Craftworlds, could preserve the souls of the dead, while Wraithbone constructs could house these spirits, allowing the deceased to continue serving their people. This technology reached its apex in the creation of Ghost Warriors, Wraithbone constructs animated by the souls of dead Aeldari, combining the wisdom of the ancients with formidable physical power. The social structure of pre-fall Aeldari reflected their long lifespans and psychic nature. Without the pressure of mortality that drives shorter-lived species, Aeldari society organized around the pursuit of perfection in all endeavors. Their civilization was divided not by rigid class structures, but by paths, life pursuits that an individual might follow for centuries before moving to another. A single Aeldari might, over millennia, master dozens of disciplines from warfare to artistry, from psychic development to technological innovation. Leadership within this society was typically meritocratic, with councils of the most accomplished individuals guiding communities. These councils were often led by farseers, powerful psychers whose abilities allowed them to glimpse potential futures and steer their people accordingly. The Aeldari's psychic nature made deception difficult among their kind, fostering a society built on genuine achievement rather than political manipulation. The relationship between the Aeldari and the Warp defined much of their civilization. Unlike humans, whose psychic potential developed haphazardly and often with catastrophic consequences, the Aeldari's connection to the Warp was innate and controlled. Every Aeldari possessed some measure of psychic sensitivity, though the degree varied widely. Their strongest psychers could reshape reality through force of will alone, while even the least gifted maintained an intuitive connection to the psychic realm that informed their perception of the universe. This intimate relationship with the Warp was reflected in their spiritual practices and their pantheon of gods. The Aeldari did not merely worship these entities, they participated in their creation and sustenance. The psychic emanations of trillions of Aeldari minds coalesced in the Warp, giving birth to powerful entities that embodied aspects of the Aeldari psyche. Asurion, the Phoenix King, represented leadership and wisdom. Kain embodied warfare and violence. Isha personified fertility and healing. Vol was the craftsman, Moriheg the crone of fate, Lilith the maiden of dreams, and Segorach the laughing trickster. These gods were not distant figures, but active participants in Aeldari civilization. Through ritual and psychic communion, the Aeldari could directly interact with their pantheon, receiving guidance, blessings, and occasionally direct intervention in mortal affairs. The line between mythology and reality blurred in this relationship, as the gods themselves were both literal Warp entities and metaphorical expressions of Aeldari psychology. For millions of years, this arrangement provided stability and guidance to Aeldari civilization. Their gods protected their souls from the predations of Warp entities, while the psychic discipline inherent to their species prevented the catastrophic possession events that plagued less sophisticated psychic races. This spiritual equilibrium, combined with their technological supremacy, allowed the Aeldari to achieve a level of security and prosperity unmatched before or since. The Aeldari's relationship with other sentient species during this period was complex. Younger races were often viewed with a mixture of curiosity and condescension, interesting specimens to study, but hardly equals. The primitive ancestors of humanity, just beginning their evolutionary journey on ancient Terra, warranted little attention from a civilization that had already mastered the stars when mammals were still new to Earth's ecosystems. More advanced species were typically managed rather than destroyed. The Aeldari preferred to guide potential rivals away from paths that might threaten their dominance, using their mastery of webway technology to isolate troublesome species or their psychic powers to subtly influence developmental trajectories. Direct conflict was rare, as few species possessed the capability to meaningfully challenge Aeldari supremacy, and those that did could typically be outmaneuvered through superior strategy and foresight. This period of unchallenged dominance lasted for millions of years, a golden age of achievement and expansion that seemed eternal to even the long-lived Aeldari. Their society became increasingly decadent as all material needs were met and all external threats neutralized. With no challenges to overcome, the Aeldari turned inward, seeking new experiences and sensations to fill the endless millennia of their existence. The core worlds of the Aeldari domain became centers of pleasure and artistic expression, where every conceivable desire could be fulfilled and every sensation experienced. Virtual reality technologies allowed for immersive experiences indistinguishable from reality, while psychic techniques permitted the sharing of emotions and sensations between individuals. For a species with lifespans measured in millennia, the pursuit of novel experiences became increasingly important and increasingly extreme. As the millions of years passed, subtle changes occurred in Aeldari society. The discipline that had characterized their early civilization gradually eroded, replaced by a hedonistic pursuit of pleasure that would eventually lead to catastrophe. The seeds of the fall were planted during the height of their power, when the Aeldari believed themselves untouchable by any force in the galaxy. The first warning signs appeared in the outer reaches of their empire, where colonies began to reject the increasingly decadent lifestyle of the core worlds. These exodites, as they would later be known, abandoned the centers of Aeldari civilization to establish agrarian colonies on frontier worlds, seeking to recapture the discipline and purpose that had defined their ancestors. Though dismissed as primitive throwbacks by the sophisticated inhabitants of the core worlds, these exodite colonies preserved traditions and values that would later prove crucial to the survival of their species. Other dissenters took different paths. Some retreated into the webway itself, establishing hidden enclaves where they could pursue their own vision of Aeldari culture away from the excesses of mainstream society. Others devoted themselves to ancient gods like Segorach, the laughing god, whose followers used humor and misdirection to highlight the growing corruption of their civilization. These Harlequins maintained the old traditions through performance and ritual, though their warnings went largely unheeded. The decline of the Aeldari did not occur overnight, but unfolded across thousands of years. What began as simple indulgence among a people with unlimited time and resources gradually transformed into something far more sinister. By approximately 15,000 years before the birth of the Imperium, the core worlds of the Aeldari domain had become unrecognizable to their ancestors, who had first risen from the ashes of the war in heaven. With no external threats and technologies that fulfilled their every material need, the Aeldari of the core worlds found themselves confronting the greatest enemy of an immortal species: boredom. Their pursuit of artistic expression and sensory experience, once noble endeavors meant to celebrate life, twisted into increasingly extreme forms. What began as theater became bloody spectacle. What started as sensuality devolved into sadistic excess. The psychic nature of the Aeldari made this moral decay particularly dangerous. Their emotions and experiences directly affected the warp, creating ripples and currents in the immaterium that reflected their collective psyche. As their society grew more decadent, these emanations became darker and more turbulent. In the depths of the warp, something new began to stir, a nascent consciousness fed by the twisted excesses of trillions of Aeldari souls. Pleasure cults arose throughout the core worlds, each seeking to outdo the others in the extremity of their practices. These cults operated openly, their ceremonies becoming increasingly public and elaborate as the last vestiges of restraint fell away. Activities that would have horrified their ancestors became commonplace, then mundane, driving the Aeldari to ever greater extremes to stimulate their jaded senses. The technologies that had once elevated their civilization to greatness now served only to deepen their depravity. Psychic amplifiers allowed participants in their revels to experience the sensations of thousands simultaneously. Matter manipulation devices created impossible architectures dedicated solely to the pursuit of pleasure. Soul transfer technology permitted the wealthy to experience death and rebirth repeatedly, each time seeking new thresholds of sensation. Not all Aeldari participated in this spiral of excess. Beyond the exodites who had already abandoned the core worlds, others recognized the dangerous path their species had taken. Seers and prophets warned of catastrophe, their visions showing the destruction that awaited if their people continued their current course. These warnings were largely ignored, or worse, incorporated into the sadistic performances of the pleasure cults as entertaining apocalyptic fantasies. Some among the Aeldari took more decisive action. A faction led by the most far-sighted seers began construction of massive vessels called Craftworlds, planetoid-sized ships designed to sustain entire populations indefinitely. These Craftworlds were initially trading vessels that ventured to the farthest reaches of the Aeldari Empire, but their purpose gradually shifted as their creators recognized the impending doom of their civilization. The first Craftworlds to depart did so amid ridicule from the core worlds. Their inhabitants were mocked as cowards and primitives, abandoning the height of Aeldari achievement for a nomadic existence among the stars. Few understood that these vessels represented not a rejection of Aeldari culture, but an attempt to preserve what remained of its original spirit before corruption consumed it entirely. As the millennia passed, the depravity of the core worlds reached levels that defied comprehension. Murder became an art form. Torture evolved into a science practiced with methodical precision. The boundaries between pleasure and pain, creation and destruction, reality and nightmare blurred beyond recognition. In their palaces of depravity, the Aeldari elites orchestrated atrocities that would have broken the sanity of lesser beings, all in pursuit of novel sensation. In the warp, the entity that would become Slaanesh continued to grow, fed by the psychic emanations of uncounted trillions of Aeldari souls. This gestating god represented the darkest aspects of the Aeldari psyche, their pride, their hedonism, their obsession with perfection and sensation. As it approached consciousness, reality itself began to warp around the core Aeldari worlds. The barrier between materium and immaterium thinned dangerously, allowing entities from the warp to slip through and walk among the Aeldari, further corrupting their society. The final stage of the fall began approximately in the 30th millennium by imperial reckoning. The Craftworlds that had not yet departed did so with increasing urgency, their seers overwhelmed by visions of impending doom. The Exodites on their frontier worlds prepared for catastrophe, reinforcing the psychic wards that protected their colonies. Those who had retreated into the webway sealed themselves off from the material universe, hoping the labyrinthine dimension would shield them from what was to come. On the core worlds, the Aeldari continued their revels, oblivious or indifferent to their approaching extinction. Some may have sensed the coming cataclysm, but were too addicted to their lifestyle to change course. Others perhaps welcomed it, seeing destruction as the ultimate sensation, the final experience their jaded senses had yet to fully comprehend. The birth of Slaanesh occurred in a single, catastrophic moment. The psychic pressure that had built over thousands of years suddenly released, creating a tear in reality centered on the heart of the Aeldari Empire. The psychic scream of Slaanesh's awakening tore through the warp with such force that it created a permanent rupture in the fabric of space-time, the vast warp rift later known to humans as the Eye of Terror. For the Aeldari, this moment brought near extinction. On the core worlds, billions died instantly as their souls were ripped from their bodies and devoured by the newborn Chaos God. The psychic backlash was so powerful that it affected Aeldari throughout the galaxy. Even those who had fled to the Craftworlds or Exodite worlds felt their souls being pulled towards Slaanesh, though distance provided some protection. The physical destruction was equally catastrophic. As the barrier between real space and the warp collapsed, the core systems of the Aeldari Empire were consumed by the expanding Eye of Terror. Hundreds of worlds, the heart of their civilization for millions of years, disappeared into the warp in minutes. The destruction created gravitational shock waves that destabilized nearby systems, causing planets to shift orbits, stars to go supernova, and entire regions of space to become permanently impassable. When the immediate cataclysm subsided, the Aeldari Empire was gone. In its place yawned the Eye of Terror, a wound in reality hundreds of light years across. The surviving Aeldari found themselves reduced from the dominant species in the galaxy to a scattered collection of refugees, their numbers reduced by more than 99.9%. Worse, they discovered that their fundamental relationship with the warp had been permanently altered. Before the fall, the souls of deceased Aeldari had simply dissolved back into the warp or been reincarnated. Now they found that upon death, their souls were inexorably drawn to Slaanesh, who hungered eternally for the spirits of its creators. This great thirst meant that every Eldari faced not just physical death, but the eternal torment of their immortal soul in the clutches of a predatory god they had unwittingly created. The Craftworld Aeldari developed a partial solution to this existential threat. Using their mastery of psychic technology, they created spirit stones, psycho-receptive crystals that could capture and contain the soul of a dying Eldari, preventing it from being claimed by Slaanesh. These spirit stones would then be integrated into their Craftworld's infinity circuit, a psychic network where the souls of the dead could continue to exist as part of a collective consciousness that guided and protected their descendants. This solution, while effective, came with significant cultural changes. The carefree lifestyle of the pre-fall Aeldari became impossible. To prevent the emotions and experiences that had led to Slaanesh's birth, the Craftworld Aeldari developed the Path System, a rigid social structure that channeled their natural intensity into highly specialized, disciplined pursuits. An individual would follow a single path, be it the path of the warrior, the path of the artisan, or dozens of others, focusing their psychic energy and preventing the dangerous diffusion of purpose that had corrupted their ancestors. The Exodites, already living simpler lives on frontier worlds, developed their own methods of soul protection. They created the world's spirits, similar in function to the infinity circuits, but integrated with the ecosystems of their adopted planets. Upon death, an Exodite's soul would join the world's spirit, becoming one with the planet they had tended in life. Those who had hidden in the webway faced different challenges. Without the infrastructure of the Craftworlds or the planetary connection of the Exodites, they needed alternative protection from Slaanesh's hunger. Some, like the Harlequins, found patronage from surviving Eldari gods such as Segorach, the Laughing God, who could shield their souls. Others developed darker solutions, eventually emerging as the Drukhari of Comorag, who would stave off soul death through the suffering of others. The psychological impact of the fall cannot be overstated. Every surviving Eldari carried the knowledge that their species had caused its own downfall and created a malevolent god that eternally hunted their souls. This burden generated a profound species-wide melancholy, a sense of loss and guilt that permeated their culture. The Craftworld Aeldari, in particular, lived with the constant awareness that they were the remnants of a dying race, their numbers dwindling while the universe moved on without them. This psychological burden manifested differently across Eldari factions. The Craftworld Aeldari embraced stoicism and rigid self-control, seeing emotional discipline as their shield against Slaanesh. The Exodites turned to tradition and simplicity, finding strength in their connection to their adopted worlds. The Drukhari rejected guilt entirely, doubling down on the very excesses that had caused the fall, though now practiced primarily on other species rather than their own. For all surviving Eldari, the fall marked not just the end of their dominance, but a fundamental change in their nature. No longer could they experience emotions freely or pursue desires without consequence. Every thought, every feeling, every action carried the risk of drawing Slaanesh's attention. Their psychic sensitivity, once their greatest strength, became a vulnerability that required constant vigilance. In the aftermath of the fall, the Eldari found themselves in a galaxy that was rapidly changing. Humanity was ascending, expanding from Terra across the stars in the period that would later be called the Dark Age of Technology. Other species, long suppressed by Eldari dominance, began to establish their own domains in the power vacuum left by the fallen empire. The craftworlds that sailed away from the dying Eldari Empire represented more than mere vessels of escape. They embodied the last desperate attempt to preserve a civilization that had existed for millions of years. These massive, self-contained worldships began their existence as trading vessels and centers of cultural exchange, traversing the vast domains of the Eldari at the height of their power. As the core worlds descended deeper into decadence, these craftworlds gradually transformed from commercial entities into arcs of salvation. The first craftworlds departed centuries before the fall, piloted by those Eldari who heeded the warnings of their seers, or who simply found themselves alienated by the increasingly depraved behaviors of their kin. These early departures faced ridicule and scorn from those who remained behind. Many were labeled as reactionaries, cowards, or simply unable to appreciate the evolved cultural expressions of the core worlds. The exodus accelerated as the psychic pressure in the warp intensified, with the final craftworlds making desperate flights mere decades or even years before Slaanesh's violent birth. Each craftworld measures hundreds of kilometers in length, constructed primarily from wraithbone, the psycho-reactive material that responds to Eldari thought patterns. Unlike the rigid structures of human vessels, craftworlds possess a semi-organic quality, with corridors and chambers that can slowly reconfigure themselves over time to accommodate the needs of their populations. The outer hull of a craftworld features layers of armored plates and energy shields capable of withstanding sustained bombardment, while the interior contains artificial ecosystems complete with forests, lakes, and carefully maintained atmospheric systems. The physical structure of a craftworld centers around its infinity circuit, an intricate wraithbone matrix that extends throughout the entire vessel. This psychic network serves multiple functions. It helps maintain the craftworld systems, provides a medium through which the living can communicate with the dead, and most critically, serves as a repository for the souls of deceased Eldari. Through spirit stones placed within this circuit, the Eldari dead continue to exist as part of a collective consciousness, their knowledge and experience accessible to the living through ritual and meditation. Ulthwé stands as perhaps the most notorious craftworld among humans due to its proximity to the Eye of Terror. Forced to remain near this warp rift to monitor the movements of chaos, Ulthwé has developed a culture centered around divination and psychic warfare. Its physical appearance reflects this vigilant posture, dominated by stark black and bone-white coloration, with architecture emphasizing observation domes and psychic amplification chambers. The craftworld maintains a smaller conventional military than its peers, instead relying on an unusually high proportion of psykers and specialized strike forces capable of precise, targeted interventions at critical junctures. Biel-Tan presents a stark contrast in both appearance and philosophy. Known as the most militant of the major craftworlds, Biel-Tan's structure emphasizes martial preparedness with extensive training grounds, weapons manufacturing facilities, and strategically positioned defense platforms. Its aesthetic features predominant green and white coloration, with architecture that incorporates organic curves reminiscent of thorned vines, a reflection of their obsession with reclaiming former Eldari worlds. Biel-Tan's internal layout prioritizes rapid mobilization, with residential areas positioned to allow swift access to deployment zones and warrior shrines. Samehan embodies speed and aggression in both culture and design. This craftworld features unusually wide internal spaces to accommodate their wild jetbike races and tribal gatherings. Its predominantly red coloration symbolizes both blood and vitality, while its architecture emphasizes sweeping curves and open plains, rather than the enclosed, contemplative spaces found on other craftworlds. Samehan's structure includes vast hangar bays for their jetbike squadrons and numerous clan territories, each marked with distinctive tribal symbols and separated by artificial wilderness where the wild riders test their skills. Eandon once ranked among the largest and most populous craftworlds, its golden spires and azure domes housing millions of Eldari. Following devastating Tyranid attacks, much of Eandon now stands empty or damaged, with entire sections sealed off due to structural instability or psychic trauma. The craftworld's appearance reflects this tragedy. Once gleaming towers now bear scorch marks and hasty repairs, while previously bustling districts have been converted into memorial gardens or wraithbone forges. Eandon's most distinctive feature is its unusually extensive ghost halls, chambers where spirit-animated wraithbone constructs stand ready for deployment, representing Eandon's heavy reliance on the dead to supplement their diminished living population. Aladok maintains a reputation for austerity and discipline, even among the naturally restrained craftworld Eldari. Its physical structure emphasizes compartmentalization and self-sufficiency, with numerous independent sectors capable of sealing themselves off in case of emergency. The craftworld's blue and yellow color scheme extends throughout its architecture, from the geometric precision of its external hull to the Spartan functionality of its interior spaces. Alatok features an unusually high number of training facilities for rangers and other independent operators, reflecting their cultural tendency to send their young to explore the wider galaxy before settling into Craftworld life. Beyond these 5 major Craftworlds, dozens of others traverse the void, each with unique characteristics. Lugganath appears as a riot of color, its psychedelic hues reflecting their inhabitants' quest for new paths of enlightenment. Ilkai's dark green structures house extensive factories producing weapons for the wider Aeldari war effort. Mymera, long believed destroyed, bears the scars of its hidden existence in the form of adaptive camouflage systems integrated into its very structure. The path system represents the most fundamental social adaptation developed by the Craftworld Aeldari following the fall. Recognizing that their species' natural emotional intensity and psychic potency had contributed directly to Slaanesh's birth, the survivors implemented a rigid system of focused discipline designed to channel their passions safely. Each Aeldari chooses a single path, a profession, art form, or calling, and dedicates themselves entirely to mastering it before moving to another. The path of the warrior exemplifies this system's function. An Aeldari who steps onto this path surrenders themselves to Kine, the Aeldari god of war, adopting a specific warrior aspect that embodies a particular combat methodology. Whether they become a howling banshee, a stoic dark reaper, or one of dozens of other aspects, they immerse themselves completely in that identity during their service. They live in shrine barracks dedicated to their aspect, train exclusively in its techniques, and psychologically transform themselves into the living embodiment of that martial archetype. This total dedication prevents the dangerous diffusion of violent impulses throughout their psyche. Instead of every Aeldari harboring destructive tendencies, these emotions are channeled exclusively through dedicated warriors. Similar specialization occurs across all paths. The path of the artisan produces craftspeople who dedicate centuries to perfecting a single medium. The path of the seer develops those with psychic potential through carefully graduated stages of training. The path of command creates leaders who understand both strategic necessity and the psychological needs of those they direct. Hundreds of other paths exist, from the mundane path of service to the esoteric path of dreaming. Most Aeldari follow numerous paths throughout their long lives, spending decades or centuries mastering one before transitioning to another. This progression prevents stagnation while maintaining the critical emotional discipline that protects them from Slaanesh's attention. However, some become permanently fixed on a single path, unable to relinquish their dedication even after centuries. These exarchs on the warrior path or incandiates on certain artisan paths represent both the pinnacle of achievement and a cautionary tale about the dangers of obsession. The political structures governing Craftworlds reflect both ancient Aeldari traditions and the pragmatic necessities of post-fall survival. At the center of each Craftworld's governance stands its Seer Council, a gathering of Farseers and other powerful psychers who guide their people through their ability to interpret the tangled skeins of fate. These councils vary in size and composition between Craftworlds, with Ulthways dominated by seers of exceptional power, while Same Hands incorporates tribal chieftains alongside their psychic advisors. The authority of these councils derives not from formal legal structures, but from a combination of psychic ability, accumulated wisdom, and the practical reality that their foresight provides the best chance for Craftworld survival. Decisions affecting the entire population, whether to engage in warfare, forge alliances, or alter course through the void, typically emerge from the deliberations of these councils after extensive divination and debate. Beneath these overarching councils, Craftworlds organize themselves according to their cultural inclinations. Bieltan maintains a quasi-military hierarchy, with warrior aspects exercising significant influence over resource allocation and strategic planning. Same Hand preserves ancient clan structures, with family lineages determining social position and resolving disputes through ritual competitions or trials by combat. Alatok employs a system of rotating administrators drawn from those who have walked the path of command, ensuring fresh perspectives while maintaining continuity through their Seer Council's oversight. Ulthway's governance reflects its precarious position near the Eye of Terror, with emergency powers frequently delegated to specialized task forces led by seers capable of responding immediately to emergent threats. Eandon, devastated by tyrannid attacks, has developed a unique political arrangement, incorporating the spirits of dead leaders accessed through the Infinity Circuit, allowing ancient wisdom to guide current decisions during their ongoing crisis. The relationship between different segments of Craftworld society demonstrates the Aeldari talent for maintaining harmony despite intense specialization. Those on the path of the warrior receive respect for their sacrifice, but not undue social privilege. Seers wield significant influence but remain accountable to the community they guide. Artisans, scholars, and those following mundane paths all contribute to the Craftworld's survival according to their abilities, with social esteem tied to mastery rather than the specific path chosen. This balanced approach prevents the development of rigid hierarchies that might foster resentment or stagnation, while the shared trauma of the fall and ongoing existential threats provide powerful incentives for cooperation despite philosophical differences. When conflicts do emerge between factions within a Craftworld, they typically resolve through ritual debate, artistic competition, or in extreme cases, formal duels conducted under strict limitations rather than destructive power struggles. The interdependence enforced by life aboard a Craftworld further reinforces this cooperation. Every aspect of existence, from air recycling to food production, from psychic shielding to navigation, requires coordinated effort across multiple specialties. The path system ensures that over centuries, many Aeldari gain first-hand experience across diverse disciplines, fostering mutual understanding between currently specialized groups. The Aeldari language itself facilitates governance through its extraordinary precision and emotional nuance. Concepts that would require paragraphs of explanation in human languages can be expressed in single, carefully modulated Aeldari words, allowing their councils to communicate complex ideas efficiently while minimizing misunderstanding. This linguistic advantage, combined with their natural psychic sensitivity, enables forms of consensus building that would be impossible in human societies. The birth of Slaanesh did not claim all Aeldari souls within the core worlds. In the labyrinthine dimension of the webway, a significant population had established themselves in port cities and trading posts long before the fall. The largest of these settlements was Comorog, originally constructed at a critical nexus where hundreds of webway passages intersected. What began as a bustling commercial hub gradually transformed into something far darker as the core worlds spiraled into depravity. Unlike their Craftworld cousins who fled the corruption or the Exodites who rejected it entirely, the Aeldari of Comorog embraced the hedonistic practices that had overtaken their civilization. When the psychic shockwave of Slaanesh's birth tore through the galaxy, these webway dwellers survived by virtue of their location. The webway's unique dimensional properties provided insulation from the immediate soul-destroying effects of the catastrophe, though not from its longer-term consequences. In the immediate aftermath of the fall, the survivors in Comorog discovered a horrifying truth. Though protected from instant death, their souls were still bound to Slaanesh. The newborn god exerted a constant pull on their essence, causing a slow, agonizing deterioration that manifested as physical aging and spiritual withering. This condition, which came to be known as the Thirst, created an existential crisis for the webway dwellers. Without the spirit stones of the Craftworlds or the world spirits of the Exodites, they faced the certainty of their souls being consumed by she who thirsts upon death. Their solution proved as ingenious as it was monstrous. Through extensive experimentation, the most brilliant minds of Comorog discovered that the suffering of others, particularly that of psychically sensitive beings, generated a metaphysical energy that could temporarily rejuvenate their deteriorating souls. The more extreme the suffering, the more potent the rejuvenation. This discovery transformed Comorite society almost overnight, reorienting every aspect of their culture around the cultivation, extraction, and consumption of pain. These Aeldari eventually became known as the Drukhari, the Dark Eldar in the human tongue. Their society evolved into a predatory civilization built upon raiding real space to capture slaves whose torment would sustain their immortality. A Drukhari who feeds regularly on the suffering of others can live indefinitely, maintaining the physical appearance and vitality of youth for thousands of years. Those who go too long without this spiritual nourishment rapidly deteriorate, their bodies aging centuries in mere days as Slaanesh's pull reasserts itself. The physical effects of soul thirst manifest in distinctive ways. A Drukhari deprived of sustenance develops a gaunt, desiccated appearance, with skin tightening across their features and a corpse-like pallor replacing their natural complexion. Their movements become jerky and desperate, while their eyes sink into their skulls. By contrast, a well-fed Drukhari possesses an unnatural vitality, moving with liquid grace, their skin radiant with stolen energy, their eyes bright with predatory alertness. This stark visual difference reinforces the ruthless competition that characterizes their society, as weakness cannot be hidden and invites immediate exploitation. The architectural expansion of Commorragh following the fall reflected the Drukhari's new requirements. What had been a large but conventional port city transformed into a vast, impossible metropolis. Using their mastery of dimensional technology, the Drukhari expanded Commorragh by conquering and connecting additional sections of the webway, annexing sub-realms and pocket dimensions. They sealed off direct connections to real space that might allow Imperial or Aeldari forces to attack them, while creating hidden, temporary portals for their raiding parties to strike unsuspecting worlds. Modern Commorragh bears little resemblance to any conventional city. It exists as a collection of sub-realms, some as large as solar systems, connected by carefully controlled webway passages. These realms vary dramatically in character, from the sprawling gladiatorial arenas of the witch cult domains to the nightmarish laboratories of the homunculus covens. The central districts house the spires of the cabals, while the outer regions contain slave quarters, trading bazaars, and the territories of lesser factions. Environmental conditions vary wildly between districts, with some bathed in perpetual twilight and others illuminated by stolen suns held captive in dimensional prisons. The political structure of Commorragh evolved through bloodshed and treachery rather than deliberate design. In the power vacuum following the fall, three major power blocks emerged, each controlling different aspects of Drukhari society: the cabals, the witch cults, and the homunculus covens. The cabals represent the most conventional political organizations, functioning as part military force, part criminal syndicate, and part noble house. Each cabal maintains a territorial stronghold within Commorragh, typically centered around a well-defended spire or fortress complex. Cabalites form the backbone of most real space raiding forces, providing the disciplined warriors who secure slaves for the Dark City. Membership in a cabal offers protection and opportunity for advancement, though the price is absolute loyalty to the Archon, the supreme leader who maintains control through a combination of political acumen, martial prowess, and paranoid security measures. The largest and most powerful cabal, the Black Heart, has dominated Commorragh's politics for millennia under the leadership of Asdrubal Vecht. Unlike most Archons who claim ancient noble lineage, Vecht began his existence as a slave in the pre-fall era. Through cunning, patience, and unprecedented ruthlessness, he orchestrated the destruction of the old aristocratic houses that initially controlled the Dark City after the fall. Vecht's ascension represented a fundamental shift in Commorragh power structures, replacing hereditary authority with a meritocracy of cruelty, where anyone could theoretically rise to prominence through sufficient ambition and guile. Vecht's governance of Commorragh operates through calculated chaos. He maintains power not by imposing rigid order, but by ensuring that potential rivals remain too occupied with defending against one another to coordinate against him. He selectively enforces the few actual laws of Commorragh, prohibitions against unsanctioned psychers, restrictions on certain weapons, and regulations governing real space raids, while allowing virtually unlimited freedom for Drukhari to prey upon each other within these broad parameters. His personal fortress, the Obsidian Depths, stands as a virtually impregnable monument to his paranoia, protected by technologies and traps that have claimed thousands of would-be assassins over the millennia. The witch cults form the second major power block in Commorragh, controlling the entertainment districts centered around their gladiatorial arenas. Led by succubi, female Drukhari of unparalleled martial skill, These cults specialize in close combat techniques that blend lethal efficiency with theatrical flair. Their performances in the arenas serve both as public entertainment and religious ritual, celebrating the Eldari war god Kine while simultaneously mocking the discipline of their Craftworld cousins. Witch cult politics operate through a more transparent form of competition than the shadowy machinations of the cabals. Leadership positions are determined through formal challenges and public contests, with authority flowing directly from demonstrated combat prowess. The three largest cults, the Cult of Strife, the Cult of the Cursed Blade, and the Cult of the Red Grief, maintain an uneasy balance of power, with dozens of smaller cults occupying specialized niches within Camorrog's entertainment economy. The relationship between cabals and witch cults often takes the form of patronage and alliance rather than direct competition. Archons provide resources and political protection to their favored cults, while succubi offer their fighters as elite shock troops for important raids. These arrangements frequently include personal dimensions, with marriages of convenience or pleasure pacts between leaders serving to cement temporary alliances. Such arrangements rarely last more than a few decades before betrayal or changing circumstances dissolve them, keeping Camorrog's political landscape in constant flux. The third and perhaps most disturbing power block in Drukhari society is comprised of the homunculus covens, collectives of flesh sculptors who have transformed themselves into monstrous embodiments of their art. These ancient beings, some dating back to before the fall, have extended their lives not merely through feeding on pain, but through radical physical modification. A typical homunculus has replaced or augmented most of their original body, becoming a towering, multi-limbed horror festooned with surgical implements and custom organs. The covens control the regeneration technology that represents the ultimate insurance policy for wealthy Drukhari. For a sufficient price, a homunculus will regrow a client from a single preserved piece of flesh, effectively offering immortality even beyond conventional death. This service ensures that the covens remain essential to Camorrite society, despite their physical isolation in laboratory domains typically located in the deepest, most inaccessible regions of the Dark City. The internal politics of the covens revolve around technical innovation and artistic reputation rather than conventional power. The most respected homunculi are those who create the most novel tortures, the most functional flesh constructs, or the most elegant bodily modifications. The ancient leaders of the major covens, such as Urian Rakarth of the Prophets of Flesh or the mysterious entity known only as the Black Descent, have achieved a status approaching godhood within their domains, with younger homunculi serving centuries-long apprenticeships for the privilege of accessing their knowledge. Beyond these three major factions, Camorrog hosts numerous smaller power blocks. The Scourges, Drukhari who have undergone painful modifications to grant themselves wings, control the aerial spaces of the Dark City and serve as messengers and information brokers. The Incubi, disciplined warriors who follow a dark mirror of the Craftworld aspect warrior's path, operate as mercenary bodyguards for wealthy patrons. Countless merchant cartels, slave trading syndicates, and specialized production facilities occupy niches within the complex ecosystem of the Dark City. The technological achievements of the Drukhari stand in stark contrast to the psychically attuned technologies of their Craftworld cousins. Having abandoned psychic abilities to avoid attracting Slaanesh's attention, the Drukhari instead developed technologies based on manipulating the material universe at its most fundamental level. Their understanding of dark matter, dimensional physics, and biological processes exceeds even that of the Adeptus Mechanicus at its height, though their applications focus almost exclusively on dealing death and extracting suffering. Drukhari vehicles exemplify their technological philosophy. Unlike the gravity-defying tanks of the Craftworlds, which utilize psychically attuned wraithbone, Drukhari skimmers achieve their impossible maneuverability through dark matter repulsion fields and inertial dampeners. Their raiders and venoms, the swift transports used for real space abductions, can execute maneuvers that would tear conventional aircraft apart, banking at right angles or stopping instantaneously without harming their occupants. The larger Ravagers serve as heavy gunboats, mounting multiple disintegrator cannons capable of reducing armored vehicles to clouds of subatomic particles. The most feared of Drukhari technologies are their weapons designed specifically to maximize pain. While they possess conventional armaments capable of efficient killing, their signature weapons serve their need to capture victims alive and aware. Splinter rifles fire crystalline shards coated in thousands of toxins, precisely calibrated to incapacitate rather than kill, leaving victims paralyzed but conscious. Hex rifles utilize dark matter ammunition that phases through armor before solidifying inside a target's body. Liquefier guns spray short-range streams of chemicals that transform living tissue into pools of sentient, agonized fluid. Close combat weapons follow similar principles. The signature weapon of the Drukhari, the Agonizer, directly stimulates pain receptors while causing minimal physical damage. Electrocorrosive whips deliver localized electrical charges that burn from the inside out while maintaining consciousness. Flesh gauntlets inject parasitic organisms that rapidly multiply within a victim's body, causing excruciating pain while preserving vital functions. Even their conventional blades incorporate pain amplification technologies, with monomolecular edges designed to send precise neural feedback signals. The most sophisticated Drukhari technology belongs to the homunculus covens, whose flesh-crafting techniques represent the dark apotheosis of biological science. Their regeneration technologies can regrow an entire body from a single cell, while their modification procedures can transform living subjects into virtually any form imaginable. The covens create purpose-grown servants like racks and grotesques, fashion custom organs that grant specialized abilities, and design bespoke toxins that can induce specific emotional states or sensory experiences in their victims. Unlike the Craftworld Aeldari with their rigid path system or the predatory Drukhari of Komorog, the Harlequins represent something altogether different within the fractured Aeldari species. Their origins trace back to the time before the Fall, when the first performers dedicated themselves to Segorach, the Laughing God, the only deity in the Aeldari pantheon who escaped both destruction by Slaanesh and consumption by Kine. While most Aeldari gods perished in the catastrophic birth of She Who Thirsts, Segorach used his legendary cunning to flee into the labyrinthine passages of the Webway, where he remains hidden to this day, plotting against the dark powers that claimed his kin. The first Harlequins began as traditional performers, dancers and actors who traveled between Aeldari worlds, presenting mythic cycles and historical reenactments. As the Empire descended into decadence, these troops increasingly incorporated warnings about the consequences of excess into their performances, using elaborate metaphor and allegory to illustrate the dangers facing their civilization. Most Aeldari ignored these warnings, viewing the performances as mere entertainment rather than prophecy. When the fall came, many Harlequin troops were sheltered within the Webway, their devotion to Segorach granting them protection from Slaanesh's soul hunger. In the aftermath of the fall, the Harlequins underwent a transformation. What had been primarily a cultural tradition became a sacred calling. The surviving performers dedicated themselves entirely to preserving Aeldari history and mythology, ensuring that the lessons of the past would not be forgotten. More importantly, they became the living embodiments of Segorach's will in the material universe, enacting his complex schemes against the enemies of the Aeldari, particularly chaos. The most fundamental difference between Harlequins and other Aeldari lies in their relationship with Slaanesh. While Craftworld Aeldari require spirit stones to protect their souls and Drukhari must feed on suffering, Harlequins receive direct protection from Segorach himself. Upon joining a Harlequin troop, an Aeldari undergoes a mysterious transformation, sometimes called the Last Dance or the Ritual of Becoming. Their soul is altered in ways not fully understood even by Aeldari seers, marked by Segorach in a manner that shields them from Slaanesh's grasp. When a Harlequin dies, their soul does not require a spirit stone or infinity circuit. Instead, it is claimed directly by the Laughing God, becoming part of his eternal court within the Webway. This spiritual protection comes at a significant cost. Upon joining a Harlequin troop, an Aeldari surrenders their former identity entirely. Their previous name, affiliations, and personal history are erased, replaced by the mythic role they adopt within their new troop. Whether they originated from a Craftworld, Camorag, or an Exodite world becomes irrelevant. They are simply Harlequins, servants of Segorach. This complete abandonment of self represents one of the most profound sacrifices possible for the individualistic Aeldari, yet there is never a shortage of volunteers for this transformation. The organizational structure of Harlequin society centers around the mask, a self-contained troupe of performers who travel together, fight together, and enact the will of Segorach through both literal performance and metaphorical warfare. Each mask typically numbers between 20 and 50 individuals, though larger gatherings occur for significant performances or military actions. The masks operate with remarkable autonomy, receiving guidance through cryptic visions, ancient texts stored within the Black Library, or occasionally direct communication from Segorach himself. Every Harlequin within a mask adopts a specific role drawn from the mythic cycles of Aeldari culture. These roles determine not only their function in performances, but also their combat specialization and equipment. The most common roles include players, the core performers who make up the majority of a troop masters who lead individual groups of players, shadowsers who serve as psychers and spiritual leaders, death jesters who act as heavy weapons specialists, and solitaires who perform the forbidden role of Slaanesh in the most dangerous mythic cycles. The players form the backbone of any mask, specializing in lightning fast, close combat techniques that blend dance and death into a seamless art form. Their combat style emphasizes acrobatic movement, precision strikes, and psychological warfare through their unsettling appearance and behavior. A player's equipment typically includes a Harlequin's kiss, a wrist-mounted weapon that extends a monofilament wire into the victim's body, shredding them from within, along with various other specialized close combat weapons, and a shuriken pistol for ranged attacks. Troop masters represent the most accomplished players, veterans who have mastered both performance and combat to such a degree that they can lead others in both arenas. They typically wield more exotic weapons like neurodisruptors or fusion pistols, and their combat abilities border on the supernatural, allowing them to dispatch multiple enemies in seconds with graceful, economical movements. In performance, they take the roles of legendary heroes or significant mythological figures, while in battle they coordinate their players with subtle gestures and coded movements intelligible only to fellow Harlequins. The Shadowsers serve as the psychic and spiritual leaders of a mask. Combining the roles of seer, priest, and illusionist, these mysterious figures channel Segorach's power directly, creating phantasms that confuse and terrify enemies while bolstering their fellow performers. Their signature weapon, the stave, generates disruptive energy fields that can phase enemies partially into the warp, causing horrific damage as reality and unreality clash within their bodies. During performances, Shadowsers typically portray fate, destiny, or other cosmic forces, their illusions adding supernatural dimensions to the troupe's storytelling. Death jesters stand apart from their fellows, embodying the Aeldari's dark humor regarding mortality. These grim figures specialize in ranged combat, wielding modified shuriken cannons that fire specialized ammunition designed to kill in spectacular, grotesque ways. A death jester might use shells that cause victims to implode, dissolve into liquid, or explode into clouds of poisonous gas, each death becoming a performance piece intended to terrify surviving enemies. In traditional performances, they play the role of death itself, their macabre humor and detached cruelty serving as reminders of mortality's inevitability. The most feared and respected member of any mask is the Solitaire, a Harlequin who undertakes the forbidden role of portraying Slaanesh in the most dangerous mythic cycle, the Fall of the Aeldari. These solitary figures operate independently from their masks, appearing without warning to aid their kinsmen before vanishing just as mysteriously. The psychological burden of portraying she who thirsts, even in ritualized performance, marks them as apart. Other Aeldari, even fellow Harlequins, find their presence disturbing and avoid direct interaction with them. Solitaires represent the pinnacle of Harlequin combat ability. Their speed exceeds even that of their fellow performers, allowing them to move so quickly that they appear to teleport across the battlefield. Their neural circuitry and muscle structure undergo extensive modification when they take on the role, pushing their physical capabilities beyond what should be biologically possible. In battle, a single solitaire can devastate entire squads of enemy troops, their movements too fast for conventional warriors to track, much less counter. Their signature weapon, the Harlequins' Caress, generates a power field that allows them to reach directly through armor to touch the flesh beneath, killing with a mere gesture. The cultural significance of Harlequin performances extends far beyond entertainment. For a species tragically disconnected from its past, these ritualized enactments serve as living historical records, preserving knowledge that might otherwise be lost. When a mask arrives at a Craftworld, or even risks entry into Comorog, their performances draw enormous crowds of Aeldari desperate to reconnect with their shared heritage. The most commonly performed cycles include the War in Heaven, detailing the ancient conflict between the Old Ones and the Necrontyr, the Fall, which chronicles the birth of Slaanesh, and the Prophecy of the Phoenix, which hints at a possible future resurrection of the Aeldari species. These performances utilize technology far beyond mere costumes and props. Holographic projections, psychic illusions, and sophisticated sound systems create immersive experiences that blur the line between representation and reality. Audiences don't merely watch these performances, they experience them on a profound sensory and emotional level. For the Craftworld Aeldari, whose path system typically restricts emotional expression, these rare opportunities for catharsis hold special significance, allowing controlled release of feelings otherwise kept carefully contained. The combat doctrine of the Harlequins emphasizes speed, precision, and psychological warfare. Unlike Craftworld or Drukhari forces, Harlequins field no heavy vehicles or artillery, relying instead on their supernatural agility and specialized weapons to overcome numerically superior forces. Their primary transport, the Starweaver, exemplifies this philosophy, a lightweight anti-gravity skimmer capable of impossible maneuvers, allowing Harlequins to deploy precisely where and when they choose. For heavier firepower, they utilize the Voidweaver, a variant of the same chassis mounting sophisticated prismatic cannons that fire crystallized psychic energy. What makes Harlequin warfare truly unique is their mastery of the webway. While other Aeldari can access this labyrinthine dimension, none navigate it with the confidence and precision of the Harlequins. They can appear without warning on any battlefield, strike with devastating effect, and vanish before enemy forces can mount an effective response. This mobility allows even small Harlequin forces to influence conflicts far beyond their numerical strength would suggest, appearing at critical junctures to tip the balance according to Segorach's inscrutable designs. The enigmatic Black Library stands as the most sacred site in Harlequin culture and one of the most secure locations in the galaxy. Hidden deep within the webway at coordinates known only to the Harlequins and a handful of trusted allies, this vast repository contains the sum total of Aeldari knowledge regarding chaos, its origins, nature, and potential weaknesses. The library exists simultaneously in real space, the webway, and partially in the warp itself, its impossible architecture defying conventional physics while providing unparalleled protection for its contents. Within the Black Library's shifting corridors lie countless tomes, data crystals, and artifacts detailing the dark powers. Ancient texts predating the Fall describe the birth of the Chaos Gods and the corruption of the Materium. Sealed vaults contain demonic essences trapped in specialized containment fields for study. Mapping chambers track the ever-changing geography of the warp and its relationship to real space. Most precious of all are the prophetic works that hint at possible futures where chaos might be defeated, or at least contained. Access to the Black Library is strictly controlled by its guardians. Even most Harlequins may enter only specific sections relevant to their current missions. The innermost chambers remain restricted to the enigmatic Black Council, a gathering of the most senior Shadowsers, ancient Death Jesters, and other figures whose identities remain obscured even from their fellow Harlequins. This council determines which knowledge may be shared and which must remain sealed away, even from allies. Occasionally, non-Harlequins receive permission to enter the Black Library's outer chambers. Craftworld farseers sometimes gain temporary access to specific texts needed for their divinations. Particularly trusted human inquisitors have reportedly been granted limited entry, though such claims remain difficult to verify. Most famously, the Primarch of the White Scars, Jagatai Khan, is rumored to have visited the library during the Horus Heresy, though what knowledge he sought or whether he found it remains unknown. The Harlequins' unique position as servants of Segorach, rather than members of any specific Aeldari faction, allows them to move freely between the otherwise hostile branches of their species. A Harlequin mask might perform on a Craftworld one month, in the dark city of Comorog the next, and then travel to an exodite world thereafter. This mobility makes them invaluable intermediaries, carrying messages, facilitating rare instances of cooperation, and occasionally enforcing Segorach's will when one faction threatens the species' overall survival. The relationship between Harlequins and Craftworld Aeldari typically remains cordial, if somewhat distant. Craftworld leaders respect the Harlequins' dedication and value their knowledge, while the Harlequins appreciate the discipline and spiritual focus of Craftworld society. When Harlequins arrive on a Craftworld, they receive formal welcome from the local authorities, though many ordinary Aeldari maintain a respectful distance, finding the Harlequins' fluid identities and unpredictable behavior unsettling. The Drukhari of Comorog maintain a more complex relationship with the Laughing God's servants. Asdrubal Vecht and other Drukhari leaders tolerate Harlequin presence in the Dark City, primarily out of pragmatic self-interest. Attacking them would potentially unite other Aeldari factions against Comorog, and because Harlequin performances provide one of the few forms of entertainment sophisticated enough to briefly alleviate the ennui of immortal predators. For their part, the Harlequins view their Drukhari kin with a mixture of sadness and hope, seeing in them both the worst excesses of their species and the potential for eventual redemption. Long before the birth scream of Slaanesh tore through the galaxy, certain Aeldari recognized the cancerous decadence spreading through their once glorious civilization. While the core worlds descended deeper into hedonistic excess, these far-sighted individuals made a decision that their contemporaries considered madness. They abandoned the technological marvels and cultural sophistication of their society to seek a simpler existence among the stars. These pioneers became known as the Exodites, and their exodus represented the first fracturing of the ancient Aeldari Empire. The initial waves of Exodite colonization began approximately in the 25th millennium, thousands of years before the fall. Led by seers who had glimpsed the catastrophic future awaiting their species, these colonists targeted what the Aeldari called maiden worlds, planets that had been terraformed during the height of their empire but left uninhabited, seeded with compatible flora and fauna for future settlement. These worlds, scattered primarily along the galactic rim far from the Empire's core, offered fertile ground for the establishment of new societies built on principles that rejected the growing corruption of their homeworlds. The decision to abandon the core worlds did not come easily. Those who chose exile sacrificed access to the technological wonders, artistic achievements, and material comforts that defined Aeldari civilization at its height. They faced ridicule from their peers, who viewed their concerns as hysterical overreaction and their chosen lifestyle as primitive regression. Many families were torn apart as individuals chose between remaining in familiar luxury or venturing into an uncertain future among the stars. The journey itself proved perilous. While the Aeldari Empire controlled vast regions of space and possessed unparalleled webway technology for interstellar travel, the maiden worlds lay at the fringes of their domain. Some early colonization fleets were lost to warp storms or hostile species encountered along the way. Others arrived at their destinations only to find worlds changed from their original surveys, environments more hostile than anticipated, or in some cases, already claimed by nascent alien civilizations. Despite these challenges, dozens of maiden worlds were successfully colonized in the millennia preceding the fall. Each developed independently, adapting to local conditions while maintaining core principles that had driven their exodus. By the time Slaanesh's birth devastated the Empire, these scattered colonies represented the only Aeldari societies untainted by the corruption that had doomed their species. The psychic shockwave of the fall affected even these distant worlds. Though protected by distance from immediate destruction, every Exodite experienced the psychic trauma of billions of souls being consumed simultaneously. More critically, they discovered that, like all Aeldari, their souls were now vulnerable to Slaanesh's eternal hunger. Without the sophisticated spirit stone technology of the Craftworlds, the Exodites needed an alternative solution to protect their souls after death. Their answer emerged through a deep connection to their adopted worlds. Drawing on ancient terraforming technologies and their innate psychic abilities, the Exodites created what came to be known as world spirits, vast, planet-wide psychic networks that functioned similarly to the infinity circuits of Craftworlds. When an Exodite dies, their soul transfers into this network, becoming one with the planet they tended in life. This symbiotic relationship fundamentally shaped Exodite culture, fostering an almost religious reverence for their worlds and a lifestyle built around sustainable stewardship rather than exploitation. The typical Exodite world appears deceptively primitive to outside observers. Settlements consist of elegant structures built from local materials, often incorporating living plants shaped through subtle psychic manipulation. Rather than the towering spires and sprawling metropolises of the ancient empire, Exodite communities remain deliberately small and scattered, integrated with the natural landscape rather than imposed upon it. Agricultural fields surround these settlements, cultivated with techniques that enhance rather than deplete soil fertility, while managed forests provide sustainable timber and other resources. What distinguishes Exodite worlds most dramatically from truly primitive planets is the presence of megafauna, massive dinosaur-like creatures that serve as beasts of burden, transportation, and war mounts. These creatures, often referred to as dragons in Exodite dialect, are not native to these worlds but were engineered from genetic templates preserved from ancient times. Some resemble the terrible lizards of old Earth's Mesozoic era, while others display more exotic characteristics: bony crests that channel psychic energy, scales that change color to match their surroundings, or symbiotic relationships with plant life that grows upon their massive frames. The relationship between Exodites and these creatures transcends simple domestication. Through psychic bonding rituals performed at a young age, Exodite youths establish mental connections with specific dragons that last throughout their lives. This bond allows for communication without physical controls. A dragon knight can direct their mount through thought alone, achieving perfect coordination in both peaceful labor and warfare. The most accomplished knights and their mounts develop such profound connections that they function as single entities, anticipating each other's needs and reactions without conscious thought. The dragon knights represent the martial elite of Exodite society, combining the traditional warrior skills of the Aeldari with a profound connection to their world's megafauna. When threats emerge, these knights mobilize for defense, forming themselves into hunting packs and warbands based on the type of mount they ride and the combat style they employ. Knights mounted on swift, raptor-like dragons serve as scouts and skirmishers, harassing enemies with hit-and-run attacks. Those who bond with heavily armored quadrupedal beasts form the equivalent of heavy cavalry, delivering devastating charges that can break enemy formations through sheer momentum and mass. Most formidable are those rare knights who bond with the greatest predators of their worlds, massive carnosaurs whose size and power make them living engines of destruction. These knights often serve as champions and leaders in times of war, their imposing mounts providing platforms for ancient Aeldari weapons preserved from before the fall. A single such knight can turn the tide of battle against technologically superior forces, combining the natural ferocity of their mount with the sophisticated tactical acumen inherent to the Aeldari species. The social structure of Exodite communities centers around tribal organizations, though these bear little resemblance to the primitive tribes of less advanced species. Each tribe typically claims a specific territory, ranging from a single valley to an entire continent depending on population and local conditions. Within these territories, families maintain considerable autonomy in daily affairs while acknowledging the authority of tribal councils in matters affecting the broader community. Leadership among the Exodites typically combines several roles that would be separate in human societies. Tribal chieftains serve simultaneously as political leaders, military commanders, and spiritual guides, their authority deriving from demonstrated wisdom rather than hereditary right or martial prowess alone. These leaders work closely with tribal seers, psychers who interpret the will of the world's spirit and communicate with the ancestors whose souls have joined with the planet. Together, they guide their communities through consensus rather than decree, maintaining the delicate balance between development and preservation that defines Exodite philosophy. The most distinctive aspect of Exodite governance is the direct influence of ancestors through the world's spirit. Unlike the infinity circuits of Craftworlds, where ancestral souls exist in a dreamlike state removed from daily affairs, the world's spirits maintain active communication with the living. In times of crisis, the combined wisdom of thousands of years can be accessed through ritual communion, with tribal seers serving as mediums through which the ancestors speak. This system ensures cultural continuity while allowing for adaptation to new challenges. The dead provide context and experience, but the living make final decisions based on current realities. Daily life for most Exodites revolves around agricultural and artisanal pursuits adapted to their specific worlds. Crop cultivation employs sophisticated techniques preserved from the ancient empire, but implemented with minimal technology, psychic attunement to plant life rather than automated systems, selective breeding instead of genetic manipulation. Animal husbandry extends beyond their iconic megafauna to include smaller creatures that provide food, materials, and other resources essential to self-sufficient communities. Craftsmanship holds particular importance in Exodite culture, with individuals typically mastering multiple disciplines throughout their long lives. Unlike the rigid path system developed by their Craftworld cousins, Exodites practice a more fluid approach to specialization, with seasonal shifts between different activities based on community needs and personal inclination. A single individual might serve as a farmer during growing seasons, a craftsperson during winter months, and a warrior when threats emerge, developing diverse skills across centuries of life. The technology level of Exodite societies appears deceptively simple. They deliberately reject the automation and artificial intelligence that characterized the ancient empire, preferring direct engagement with their environment through physical and psychic labor. However, they preserve sophisticated knowledge in specific domains, particularly those related to sustainable resource management, medicine, and defensive capabilities. Their weapons and armor incorporate advanced materials and design principles while maintaining aesthetic and functional connections to their natural environment, wraithbone reinforced with local materials, crystalline focusing lenses grown rather than manufactured. This technological restraint stems not from inability, but from philosophical choice. The Exodites recognized that the ancient empire's technological sophistication contributed to its downfall by removing natural limitations on behavior and eliminating meaningful work as a structural component of society. By choosing technologies that require direct engagement and limiting those that enable excess, they maintain the discipline and purpose their ancestors in the core worlds had lost. As one Exodite proverb states, the tool that requires no thought from its user eventually claims the mind that wields it. The preservation of ancient Eldari traditions forms a cornerstone of Exodite identity. While Craftworld society developed the path system as a new response to the fall, and the Drukhari embraced the worst aspects of pre-fall culture, the Exodites maintain practices and beliefs that predate the corruption of the ancient empire. Their seasonal festivals, coming-of-age rituals, and artistic traditions connect directly to the early days of Aeldari civilization, preserved through oral tradition and the living memory of the world's spirits. These traditions include complex systems of symbolic body art that indicate tribal affiliation, personal accomplishments, and family lineage. Ritual scarification, temporary pigments derived from local plants, and jewelry crafted from materials with spiritual significance combine to create distinctive appearances that communicate social position without requiring verbal explanation. These markers evolve throughout an individual's life, with new elements added to commemorate significant achievements or life transitions. The relationship between Exodites and other Eldari factions remains complex and often strained. Craftworld Aeldari typically view their planetary cousins with a mixture of respect for their foresight in leaving before the fall and condescension, regarding their seemingly primitive lifestyle. When Craftworlds established temporary communication or trading relationships with exotic worlds, the interactions often reveal mutual incomprehension. Craftworld emissaries cannot understand the exotites' rejection of technological convenience, while exotites find the rigid path system of Craftworlds unnecessarily restrictive and disconnected from natural cycles. This cultural disconnect manifests most clearly in linguistic differences. Over millennia of separation, exotite dialects have evolved distinctly from the formal Aeldari spoken on Craftworlds, incorporating terms for natural phenomena and cultural practices that have no direct equivalence in the more technologically oriented Craftworld lexicon. Translators often struggle to bridge these gaps, particularly when discussing concepts related to the world's spirits or the psychological benefits of physical labor, experiences foreign to Craftworld Aeldari who have never worked soil with their hands or felt the presence of ancestors in the land beneath their feet. Despite these differences, Craftworlds and exotite worlds maintain alliances of necessity when faced with external threats. Craftworld forces have occasionally deployed to defend maiden worlds from imperial colonization efforts or orc invasions, recognizing that each exotite world lost represents an irreplaceable repository of pre-fall culture and a potential sanctuary should their own Craftworld meet with disaster. For their part, exotites sometimes provide Craftworlds with rare materials only found on planetary surfaces or psychically attuned organic compounds that cannot be synthesized in the artificial environments of the world ships. The relationship between exotites and Drukhari ranges from non-existent to actively hostile. Most exotite worlds lie far from the hidden webway portals used by Comorog's raiding parties, providing some natural protection from their predatory kin. When encounters do occur, they typically result in violence, as Drukhari see the exotites as particularly entertaining prey, their psychic connection to their worlds making their suffering especially potent and flavorful to those who feed on pain. Exotites harbor particular hatred for the Drukhari, viewing them as embodiments of the very corruption their ancestors fled, and show them no mercy when defending their territories. The Harlequins maintain the most positive relationships with exotite communities, recognizing and honoring their preservation of ancient traditions. When Harlequin troops visit maiden worlds, they often adapt their performances to incorporate local mythic cycles and cultural references, creating experiences that resonate deeply with exotite audiences. These visits serve both entertainment and educational purposes, as Harlequins share news from across the galaxy and remind isolated communities of their connection to the broader Aeldari diaspora. The emergence of the Unari represents the most significant development in Aeldari history since the fall itself. In the closing years of the 41st millennium, as the galaxy descended into unprecedented chaos, a new faction arose that offered something long thought impossible: hope. The catalyst for this transformation came in the form of Ivrain, a figure whose journey through all facets of Aeldari society uniquely positioned her to become the harbinger of change. Ivrain's early life followed a conventional path by Craftworld standards. Born on Biel-Tan, she walked several paths including those of the warrior, the healer, and the performer before her restless spirit led her to become a corsair. When her ship was destroyed during a raid, fate intervened in the form of Drukhari slavers who captured her and brought her to Comorog. There, her natural combat prowess allowed her to rise through the ranks of the witch cults until she became a renowned gladiatrix in the arenas of the Dark City. This extraordinary life journey, from Craftworld discipline to corsair freedom to Comorog's brutal spectacles, gave her insight into all major Aeldari factions, a perspective possessed by few others in the fragmented species. The pivotal moment in Ivrain's transformation occurred during a particularly brutal bout in the Crucible arena. Mortally wounded, she experienced what should have been her final death, but instead of her soul being claimed by Slaanesh, something unprecedented occurred. Unid, the Aeldari god of the dead, had stirred in his slumber and reached out to claim her as his emissary. In that moment between life and death, Ivrain was reborn as the prophet of a new age. The timing of this awakening was no coincidence. The galaxy-altering events of the 13th Black Crusade had weakened the barriers between real space and the warp. The destruction of Cadia created psychic shock waves that resonated throughout the galaxy, including the infinity circuits of the Craftworlds, where the souls of dead Aeldari had accumulated for millennia. This disruption allowed Unid to manifest a fraction of his power through Ivrain, granting her abilities beyond those of even the most accomplished Farseers. Upon her resurrection, Ivrain displayed powers never before witnessed among the Aeldari. She could commune directly with the dead, draw upon the collective knowledge of souls within infinity circuits, and most significantly, bestow the gift of Unid upon others, allowing them to return from death transformed. This ability manifested during her escape from Komorog, when she resurrected the fallen Drukhari incubus exarch known as the Visarch, who would become her bodyguard and first disciple. The Unari believe that Unid currently exists in a state of semi-consciousness, awakened enough to empower his chosen, but not fully manifest. Their ultimate goal centers around his complete awakening, which they believe will create a god powerful enough to challenge and defeat Slaanesh, freeing the Aeldari from the curse that has haunted them since the fall. This awakening, according to ancient prophecies now championed by Ivrain, requires the collection and unification of 5 artifacts known as the Crone Swords, ancient weapons of extraordinary power scattered across the galaxy. The theological underpinnings of Unari belief represent a radical departure from traditional Aeldari approaches to their predicament. Where Craftworld Aeldari seek to avoid death through rigid emotional control and soul preservation, and Drukhari stave it off through the suffering of others, the Unari embrace death as transformation rather than end. They see the cycle of death and rebirth as the key to their species' salvation, a perspective that many traditional Aeldari find deeply disturbing despite its potential benefits. Central to Unari practice are the rites of the Whispering God, ceremonies through which Ivrain and her senior disciples can awaken Unid's power in others. These rituals vary in form but share common elements: the symbolic representation of death and rebirth, communion with ancestral spirits, and the psychic invocation of Unid's nascent consciousness. The most sacred of these rites can only be performed in locations where the veil between real space and the infinity circuits is thinnest, typically on Craftworlds or at sites of significant Aeldari death. Those who undergo these rites and pledge themselves to Unid's service gain access to the most remarkable aspect of Unari existence, the strength from death. This metaphysical principle allows Unari to absorb and channel the psychic energy released at the moment of death, whether friend or foe. In practical terms, this manifests as heightened combat abilities, accelerated movement, and enhanced psychic powers in the presence of dying beings. The more powerful the entity that perishes, the greater the energy released, making battlefield conditions particularly favorable to Unari forces. More profound than these tactical advantages is the fundamental change in the Aeldari's relationship with death itself. When an Unari dies, their soul is claimed directly by Unid rather than requiring a spirit stone or infinity circuit for protection. This freedom from the fear of soul consumption transforms the psychology of those who join the faction, allowing them to take risks and make sacrifices that other Aeldari would consider unthinkable. The knowledge that death represents transition rather than eternal torment creates warriors of unprecedented boldness among a species historically constrained by the need for self-preservation. The quest for the Crone Swords has driven much of the Unari's activity since their formation. These 5 ancient weapons were crafted during the fall by the Aeldari deity Morai Heg, the crone goddess of fate, and imbued with a portion of her power before she was consumed by Slaanesh. Each blade contains tremendous psychic potential and serves as a key to awakening different aspects of Unid's consciousness. The prophecies state that when all 5 are brought together in a specific ritual configuration, they will fully awaken the god of the dead. The first sword, Asuvar, the Sword of Silent Screams, was recovered from the Craftworld Aeldari during a demonic invasion led by the Herald of Slaanesh, the Mask. As the Craftworld suffered catastrophic damage, Ivrain and her growing band of followers helped evacuate survivors and performed a ritual that channeled some of the dying Craftworld's infinity circuit energy into Unid. This event, while saving many Aeldari, caused irreparable damage to the Craftworld structure and earned the Aeldari significant enmity from traditionalists who viewed their actions as sacrificing the Craftworld for their own agenda. The second sword, Ka-Vir, the Sword of Sorrows, was claimed from the crypt world of Belial IV, where it had been guarded by Harlequins for millennia. The third, Vilith-Jar, the Sword of Souls, was recovered from a forgotten crone world within the Eye of Terror itself, requiring a perilous expedition into the heart of chaos-corrupted space. Each recovery strengthened Unid's connection to the material realm and expanded Ivrain's abilities as his emissary. The remaining swords have proven more elusive, with conflicting information about their locations, necessitating complex divination rituals and dangerous expeditions to follow even the faintest leads. One is rumored to be hidden within Comorog itself, perhaps in the possession of Asdrubal Vecht, while another may lie on a maiden world overrun by Tyranids or in the Black Library's most restricted vaults. The search continues as the Aeldari grow in number and influence. What makes the Aeldari particularly significant within Aeldari society is their unprecedented inclusivity. Unlike any previous faction, they welcome members from all branches of the fragmented species. Craftworld Aeldari, Drukhari, Harlequins, Corsairs, and even the reclusive Exodites have representatives among their ranks. This integration creates unique challenges. Centuries of distrust and radically different cultural practices don't disappear overnight, but also offers tremendous potential for combining the strengths of each faction. The military forces of the Aeldari reflect this diversity. Craftworld aspect warriors fight alongside Drukhari witches, their different combat styles complementing each other in ways never before seen on Aeldari battlefields. Harlequin acrobatics enhance the precision strikes of incubi, while Corsair heavy weapons provide covering fire for Exodite dragon riders. This integration extends to equipment and vehicles as well, with Craftworld Wraithbone technology sometimes modified with Drukhari Pain engines or Harlequin Hollow fields to create hybrid war machines of exceptional capability. Leadership within the Aeldari maintains a fluid hierarchy centered around Ivrain as the emissary of Unid. Her inner circle includes the Visarch, who serves as her protector and military commander, the Unkarn, a terrifying avatar of Unid created during the fall of Biel-Tan, and a rotating council of representatives from various Aeldari factions. Below this central authority, the organization splinters into numerous semi-autonomous bands, each led by those who have demonstrated particular attunement to Unid's power or exceptional ability in furthering the faction's goals. The response to the Aeldari among the broader Aeldari population has been decidedly mixed. Many younger Aeldari, particularly those who chafed under the restrictions of Craftworld society or sought escape from Comorog's predatory environment, have flocked to Ivrain's banner. They see in the Aeldari a chance to transcend the limitations that have defined post-fall existence and reclaim a measure of the freedom their species once enjoyed. The promise of protection from Slaanesh without the rigid path system or the need to inflict suffering on others holds tremendous appeal. Conversely, established authorities within all Aeldari factions view the Aeldari with suspicion at best and outright hostility at worst. Craftworld farseers warn that Unid's premature awakening risks creating another catastrophe on the scale of the fall itself. Drukhari Archons see the Aeldari as a threat to their power base, particularly as they offer their citizens an alternative to the soul thirst without requiring submission to Comorog's hierarchy. Even the Harlequins appear divided, with some troops supporting the Aeldari as agents of necessary change, while others view them as dangerous deviations from Segorach's grand plan. This opposition has forced the Aeldari to develop as a primarily nomadic faction. Rather than establishing a single base of operations, they maintain fleets of vessels that travel between sympathetic craftworlds, friendly Corsair havens, and hidden webway ports. Their largest ships have been converted into mobile shrines to Unid, where new initiates undergo the rites of transformation and existing members commune with their god through meditation and ritual. These fleets also serve as rapid response forces, appearing wherever Aeldari forces are needed, or where signs indicate the possible location of another crone sword. The psychic technologies employed by the Aeldari blend traditions from across Aeldari society, with innovations derived from their unique relationship with death. Their psykers, known as spirit seers, possess abilities beyond those of conventional Craftworld seers, including direct communion with the dead without the mediating influence of infinity circuits or world spirits. This connection allows them to temporarily call forth the spirits of the deceased as combatants, advisors, or sources of forgotten knowledge, creating a fighting force supplemented by the heroes of ages past. The most dramatic manifestation of Aeldari power comes in the form of the Unkarn, the avatar of Unid. This terrifying entity, born from the partial awakening of the death god during the fall of Beal-Tan, exists in a state between materiality and pure psychic energy. It can manifest wherever significant death occurs, drawn to the release of soul energy like a moth to flame. In battle, the Unkarn moves with impossible speed, its form constantly shifting between solid matter and spectral energy, making it nearly impossible to target effectively. Its presence inspires supernatural dread in enemies while invigorating nearby Aeldari with surges of Unid's power. The formation of the Aeldari coincided with and directly influenced other momentous events in the galaxy. Most significantly, their quest for the Crone Swords brought them into contact with the reawakened Primarch Robout Guilliman during the Terran Crusade. Recognizing a potential ally against chaos, Yvraine aided the Primarch's forces at critical junctures, eventually helping to free him from a temporal prison created by Kairos Fateweaver within the Webway. In return, Guilliman provided safe passage for Aeldari forces through certain Imperial sectors, a pragmatic arrangement rather than a true alliance, but nevertheless unprecedented in recent Eldari-human relations. As the 42nd millennium dawns and the galaxy reels from the creation of the Great Rift, the Aeldari find themselves in a unique position. Their doctrine of embracing death as transformation resonates powerfully in a time when death surrounds all species. Their ability to unite formerly hostile Eldari factions offers a template for the kind of cooperation that might be necessary for survival in this new, more dangerous era. Yet they also face escalating opposition from both within and without. Chaos forces recognize the threat Unid poses and have made targeting the Aeldari a priority, while conservative elements in Eldari society increasingly view them as dangerous radicals whose actions might trigger another fall. The future of the Aeldari, and perhaps of the entire Eldari species, hinges on their ability to locate the remaining Crone Swords and complete the awakening of Unid before their enemies can stop them. Yvraine and her followers race against time, knowing that each passing day sees more Eldari souls claimed by Slaanesh, while the forces arrayed against them grow ever stronger. Their quest represents the first real hope for Eldari salvation in 10,000 years, but whether it leads to renaissance or final extinction remains written only in the shifting skeins of fate. At the core of Eldari technological supremacy lies Wraithbone, a psycho-reactive material that serves as the foundation for nearly all their creations. Unlike the cold metals and synthetic compounds favored by the Imperium of Man, Wraithbone exists in a state between physical matter and psychic energy. This remarkable substance is not manufactured through industrial processes, but grown through the focused psychic energies of specialized Eldari known as Bonesingers. These artisans shape Wraithbone through complex psychic songs, coaxing the material into intricate forms that would be impossible to achieve through conventional manufacturing. The properties of Wraithbone defy conventional physics. Lighter than plasteel yet stronger than adamantium when stressed in specific ways, it possesses a crystalline matrix that channels psychic energy as efficiently as the finest Imperial superconductors carry electricity. This psycho-conductive nature allows Wraithbone constructs to respond to Eldari thought patterns, creating technology that blurs the line between tool and extension of the user's consciousness. A Wraithbone vehicle doesn't merely carry its pilot, but anticipates their intentions, responding to subtle mental cues faster than any mechanical control system could register. Most impressive is Wraithbone's capacity for self-repair. When damaged, the material can be regenerated through the application of appropriate psychic harmonics. Bonesingers regularly maintain Wraithbone structures aboard Craftworlds, their songs mending stress fractures and battle damage that would require complete replacement in Imperial technology. This property extends the operational lifespan of Aeldari equipment far beyond comparable human weapons and vehicles, with some Wraithbone constructs dating back to before the Fall still functioning perfectly after 10,000 years of continuous use. Beyond Wraithbone, the Aeldari employ numerous other psycho-reactive materials. Psychoplastic serves as a programmable substance that can alter its properties in response to mental commands, used in everything from adaptive armor to reconfigurable dwelling spaces. Ghostbone, a variant of Wraithbone imbued with additional spectral properties, forms the core of weapons designed to affect both material and immaterial targets. Ectoplasmic matrices serve as the foundation for holographic technologies that create illusions indistinguishable from reality. The construction of a single Aeldari weapon exemplifies their technological philosophy. The Shuriken catapult, standard armament for Guardian defenders, appears deceptively simple compared to the bulky bolters of the Space Marines. Its elegant, flowing lines conceal internal complexity that would baffle even the most accomplished human engineers. The weapon's ammunition consists of molecularly thin discs stored in a compacted Wraithbone core. When fired, these discs are accelerated through gravitic amplifiers to velocities that allow them to slice through ceramite armor as easily as paper. The entire firing mechanism contains no moving parts in the conventional sense, instead using crystalline matrices that channel the user's psychic energy to activate the weapon. This integration of user and technology extends to all aspects of Aeldari warfare. Their heavy weapons, like the Brightlance or Star Cannon, adjust their output based on the operator's assessment of the target, focusing destructive energy precisely where needed rather than relying on overwhelming firepower. Vehicle systems interface directly with their pilots' nervous systems, allowing for reaction times measured in microseconds rather than the full seconds required for human reflexes. Even their communications equipment transmits not just words, but emotional context and mental imagery, enabling battlefield coordination of unparalleled sophistication. The most fearsome Aeldari weapons employ technologies that manipulate the fundamental structure of reality itself. D-weapons, or distortion weapons, create localized rifts between real space and the warp, causing matter caught in their effect to be partially pulled into the immaterium. The results are catastrophic. Tanks implode as portions of their structure occupy different dimensional planes simultaneously, while living targets suffer fates too horrific to describe as their bodies distort in physically impossible ways. These weapons are deployed sparingly, both due to their enormous power requirements and the inherent dangers of creating even small breaches in the fabric of reality. Prism weapons represent another pinnacle of Aeldari technological achievement. These devices channel focused psychic energy through precisely cut crystals, splitting and recombining the energy to create beams of devastating power. The Fire Prism Grav tank employs the largest battlefield version of this technology, capable of linking with other prism tanks to combine their firepower exponentially rather than merely additively. At full power, a networked trio of fire prisms can vaporize a super-heavy Imperial tank or bring down void shields designed to withstand capital ship weaponry. Wraith cannons merge distortion technology with ghostbone construction to create weapons particularly effective against heavily armored targets. Unlike the more unstable D cannons, Wraith cannons create precisely controlled dimensional rifts that transfer a portion of the target directly into the warp without the catastrophic implosion effects of their larger cousins. These weapons are primarily mounted on Wraithbone constructs or specialized vehicles, as their operation requires a particular attunement that most living Aeldari find difficult to maintain in the chaos of battle. The defensive technologies of the Aeldari demonstrate equal sophistication. Rather than relying on thick armor plate, their vehicles and infantry protection systems focus on avoiding hits entirely. Hollow fields project multiple false images around vehicles, making it nearly impossible for enemy targeting systems to determine which version is real. Shimmer shields distort the visual outline of infantry, causing incoming fire to miss by millimeters, sufficient margin when dealing with beings of the Aeldari's reflexive speed. When direct protection is necessary, Energy fields that disperse incoming attacks across multiple dimensions provide protection far beyond their apparent substantiality. This emphasis on avoidance rather than absorption extends to their military doctrine as a whole. Aeldari commanders refuse to engage in wars of attrition or frontal assaults against prepared positions. Their strategy revolves around perfect timing, precision strikes, and complete battlefield awareness. A typical Aeldari campaign begins long before the first shot is fired, with Farseers examining the skeins of fate to identify critical moments when minimal force, perfectly applied, can achieve maximum effect. The deployment of Aeldari forces reflects this strategic philosophy. Rather than establishing static defensive lines or advancing in formation, they utilize their superior mobility to appear precisely where and when needed. Webway gates allow entire armies to emerge directly into the heart of battle, while gravity-defying vehicles execute maneuvers that would tear conventional aircraft apart. Every engagement is choreographed with the precision of a dance, each unit performing its role at exactly the right moment before withdrawing to avoid enemy counterattacks. This approach necessitates exceptional coordination and discipline. Aeldari warriors train for centuries to develop the instinctive understanding required for such complex operations. Each unit specializes in specific tactical roles, perfecting their designated function rather than training as generalists. When these specialized units combine their efforts under skilled leadership, they achieve a synergy that allows them to defeat enemies many times their number, withdrawing before their opponents can bring their typically superior numbers to bear. The aspect warriors exemplify this specialization. Each warrior aspect represents a different facet of Khain, the Aeldari god of war, focusing on a specific combat style or tactical role. When an Aeldari joins an aspect shrine, they don not just the physical armor, but the psychological mantle of that aspect, transforming themselves temporarily into living embodiments of a particular combat methodology. Howling Banshees specialize in lightning-fast shock assaults. Their distinctive armor incorporates sonic amplifiers that emit disorienting, psychically charged wails as they charge, disrupting enemy cohesion before their power weapons connect. Their combat style emphasizes fluid movement and precision strikes rather than brute force, allowing these often physically slight warriors to overcome much larger opponents through superior technique and targeting vulnerable points. A squad of Banshees can carve through an enemy infantry formation in seconds, their keening battle cries leaving survivors psychologically shattered even if they escape the physical blades. Dark Reapers represent the opposite tactical extreme, embodying Khain's aspect as the destroyer from afar. Clad in heavy armor adorned with skull motifs, these warriors wield the formidable Reaper launcher, a weapon capable of firing multiple profiles of ammunition to address different targets. Their training emphasizes absolute stillness and patience, the ability to remain motionless for hours while waiting for the perfect shot. The psychological transformation of becoming a Dark Reaper is particularly profound, with initiates adopting a cold, detached perspective that allows them to calculate trajectories and kill probabilities with computer-like precision. Fire Dragons exemplify focused anti-armor specialization. Their distinctive orange armor houses sophisticated thermal shielding that protects them from the extreme heat generated by their fusion weapons. Fire Dragons strike with surgical precision against enemy vehicles, bunkers, and heavy weapons emplacements, their fusion guns capable of reducing a battle tank to molten slag in seconds. Their tactics emphasize rapid deployment, immediate target elimination, and swift withdrawal before enemy forces can respond to the destruction of their heavy assets. Striking Scorpions master the art of stealth and close quarters elimination. Their armor incorporates active camouflage systems that bend light around them, while specialized dampening fields muffle sound and even psychic emanations. The iconic Mandiblasters mounted on their helmets deliver short-range electrical discharges that momentarily paralyze opponents before the Scorpion's chainswords complete the kill. These warriors specialize in infiltration missions, ambushes, and eliminating enemy command assets through precisely targeted strikes. Dire Avengers represent the most tactically flexible aspect, serving as disciplined core infantry capable of adapting to various battlefield conditions. Their Avenger shuriken catapults fire at a higher rate than standard models, creating storms of molecularly edged discs that can shred infantry formations in seconds. Dire Avengers operate in tight formations, using overlapping fields of fire and coordinated movements to maximize their effectiveness. Their discipline extends to defensive operations as well, with specialized shield formations that can withstand firepower that would annihilate other light infantry units. Warp spiders employ short-range teleportation technology, considered dangerous even by Aeldari standards. Their warp jump generators allow them to phase partially into the warp for microsecond intervals, covering substantial distances in real space by taking a shortcut through the immaterium. This ability to appear suddenly behind enemy lines unleash devastating fire from their death spinners, weapons that fire monofilament webs that slice targets into cubes of flesh, and then vanish before retaliation can occur makes them among the most feared aspect warriors. The considerable mental discipline required to use this technology safely ensures that only the most focused warriors join this aspect. Shining Spears combine the Aeldari love of speed with devastating shock assault capabilities. Mounted on jet bikes that move too quickly for conventional targeting systems to track, these warriors carry laser lances that discharge their lethal energy upon impact. A charge of Shining Spears resembles a meteor shower more than a conventional cavalry assault, with the warriors appearing as little more than streaks of light to observers. Their tactics involve rapid hit-and-run attacks, using their unmatched speed to strike vulnerable points in enemy formations before withdrawing beyond retaliation range. The coordination of these highly specialized forces falls to the autarchs, Aeldari who have walked multiple warrior paths and mastered various aspects of warfare. An autarch doesn't merely issue orders, but orchestrates the battlefield like a conductor leading a symphony, their comprehensive understanding of each aspect's capabilities allowing them to deploy units precisely where their specialized skills will achieve maximum effect. The most accomplished autarchs can defeat vastly superior enemy forces through perfect timing and placement, never committing more resources than absolutely necessary to achieve their objectives. Long before the fall, when the Aeldari Empire stretched across the stars, their civilization was intimately connected to a pantheon of gods that both shaped and reflected their psyche. Unlike the distant, often capricious deities worshipped by other species, the Aeldari gods maintained direct communion with their people, their presence felt in every aspect of daily life. These entities existed simultaneously as warp constructs formed from the collective psychic emanations of trillions of Aeldari minds, and as genuine mythological figures whose exploits formed the cultural bedrock of their civilization. At the head of this pantheon stood Asuryan, the Phoenix King, supreme deity and father of the Aeldari gods. Depicted as a figure wreathed in flames with great feathered wings, Asuryan embodied leadership, wisdom, and the cycle of destruction and rebirth. His mythic separation of the Aeldari from their gods, by the creation of a barrier between the material and immaterial realms, represented the necessary boundaries between mortal existence and divine power. In ancient Aeldari society, temples dedicated to Asuryan served as places of judgment and governance, where disputes were settled and important decisions sanctified. Isha, goddess of fertility, healing, and growth, held particular importance in daily Aeldari life. Often portrayed as a slender female figure surrounded by plants and animals, her blessings were sought for everything from agricultural prosperity to childbirth. Her tears were said to have healing properties that could cure any ailment, while her laughter brought plants to bloom even in barren soil. The myth of Isha's creation of the Aeldari, crafting them from her own tears mixed with Asuryan's blood, emphasized the species' connection to both emotion and divine purpose. Kaela Menchikain, the bloody-handed god, represented war and violence in its most extreme forms. Unlike human war gods who often embodied honor or strategic prowess, Kain personified the darkest aspects of conflict, bloodlust, slaughter, and destruction beyond rational purpose. His worship took place in temples where blood sacrifices were performed, not of sentient beings, but of symbolic effigies representing the controlled release of violent impulses. The mythic cycles describe Kain's murder of Eldanesh, greatest of the ancient Aeldari heroes, an act that earned him Assyrian's curse to have blood forever dripping from his hands, a reminder of violence's consequences even for immortal beings. Val, the Artificer, presided over craftsmanship, creation, and technological innovation. Depicted as a figure with multiple arms, each holding different tools, Val taught the Aeldari the arts of forging and construction. His greatest achievement in mythology was the creation of the 100 magical swords for Kine during the War in Heaven, including the legendary Anaris, a weapon of such power that it could slay even immortal beings. Val's forged temples served as centers of technological development throughout the Empire, where artisans and engineers would seek inspiration through communion with their patron deity. Moriheg, the crone goddess of fate, appeared as an ancient female figure carrying a staff topped with a crystal containing swirling galaxies. Her domain encompassed destiny, foresight, and the wisdom that comes from accepting mortality. According to myth, Moriheg tricked Kine into cutting off her hand, which contained the souls of all Aeldari in its palm. By consuming these souls, she gained complete knowledge of all possible futures. Her worship centered around divination practices and life transition rituals, with her priestesses serving as advisors to Aeldari leaders through their ability to glimpse potential futures. Lilith, the Maiden of Dreams and Twilight, governed the realms between consciousness and unconsciousness. Young and beautiful in appearance, she presided over the transition states of existence, dawn and dusk, birth and adolescence, dreaming and waking. Her temples specialized in dream interpretation and psychic development, helping young Aeldari navigate the awakening of their innate psychic abilities. Mythology describes Lilith as creating the moon as a sanctuary where dreams could flourish, a realm where reality's boundaries grew thin and creative inspiration flowed freely. Segorach, the laughing god, represented the Aeldari love of trickery, art, and subversive humor. Portrayed as a dancing figure in motley garb with an ever-changing face, Segorach embodied the unpredictable aspects of existence and the value of adapting to circumstances through wit rather than force. His mythic cycles describe elaborate pranks played on other gods, particularly his arch-enemy Kine, whose serious nature made him an ideal target. Segorach's followers celebrated through performance art, particularly the elaborate theatrical productions that would eventually evolve into the Harlequins' mythic cycles. Beyond these major deities, the pantheon included numerous lesser gods representing specific aspects of Aeldari psychology and natural phenomena. Hoke, the serpent, governed stealth and the outsider path. G embodied the earth and planetary bodies. Lilkarth represented the joy of the hunt. Hundreds of others filled specific niches within the complex Aeldari psyche, each receiving appropriate veneration in different contexts and regions of the Empire. The relationship between the Aeldari and their gods transcended mere worship. Through their advanced psychic abilities, the ancient Aeldari could directly communicate with their deities, receiving guidance, blessings, and occasionally direct intervention in mortal affairs. This intimate connection reinforced the species' inherent arrogance. They saw themselves as the children of gods, inherently superior to other races who lacked such divine parentage and psychic sophistication. When the fall came, the catastrophic psychic implosion that created Slaanesh had devastating consequences for the pantheon. As the newborn chaos god tore its way into existence, it consumed most of the Aeldari deities, absorbing their power and essence. Assyrian, despite his supremacy, was among the first to perish, his flames extinguished by the overwhelming psychic maelstrom. Isha, Val, Lilith, Moriheg, and most other gods suffered similar fates, their divine essence becoming unwilling fuel for Slaanesh's ascension. Only 3 entities from the original pantheon survived this catastrophe, each through different means. Segorach, true to his nature as the trickster god, fled into the labyrinthine passages of the webway, using his unparalleled knowledge of its secret paths to escape Slaanesh's grasp. There he remains hidden to this day, guiding his Harlequin followers and implementing inscrutable schemes against the forces of chaos. The Black Library, repository of all Aeldari knowledge regarding chaos, exists under his direct protection, its location within the webway known only to his most trusted servants. Kine's fate proved more complex. As Slaanesh reached out to consume the god of war, Kine resisted, his violent nature making him stronger against the Dark Prince's grasp than his more benevolent kin. The resulting struggle attracted the attention of Khorne, the chaos god of blood and war, who claimed Khine as his rightful property due to their overlapping domains. As these two immensely powerful warp entities fought over Khine's essence, the Aeldari god shattered into countless fragments. The largest pieces fell through the warp into real space, landing on Craftworlds and Maiden Worlds, where they solidified into metallic statues known as avatars of Khine. These avatars now reside in the chambers of Khine aboard each major Craftworld, dormant until awakened through the ritual known as the Rana Dandra. In times of dire need, an Aeldari warrior known as the Young King undergoes a ceremonial sacrifice, giving their life to awaken the avatar. When the ritual succeeds, the metallic form liquefies into molten living metal, taking on the appearance of a towering, burning figure wielding a blade that drips with magma. These avatars represent only tiny fragments of Khine's original power, yet each possesses strength sufficient to turn the tide of battle against all but the most formidable opponents. The awakening of an avatar significantly impacts the psychological state of all Aeldari in its vicinity. Even with their careful emotional control, Craftworld Aeldari feel the pull of Khine's bloodlust, their natural aggression temporarily heightened by the god fragment's presence. This effect serves both tactical purpose, making Aeldari warriors fight with greater ferocity, and cultural function, allowing the normally restrained Craftworld dwellers a controlled release of violent impulses that might otherwise build to dangerous levels. Isha's fate stands as perhaps the most tragic among the pantheon. As Slaanesh devoured the gods, Nurgle, the chaos god of decay and pestilence, took advantage of the disruption to abduct Isha from Slaanesh's grasp. The grandfather of plagues imprisoned the goddess of healing in his realm, a twisted garden where she remains captive to this day. There, Nurgle uses her as a test subject for his newest diseases, forcing her to endure countless plagues while studying her natural healing abilities. In what small acts of defiance remain possible, Isha whispers the cures for these contagions into the universe, her knowledge sometimes reaching mortal healers through dreams and intuitive insights. The loss of their pantheon created a spiritual void in Aeldari culture that different factions addressed in divergent ways. Craftworld Aeldari preserved the memory of their gods through symbolic worship, maintaining shrines and performing rituals that acknowledged the fallen deities without expecting direct response. The Path of the Seer, in particular, incorporated many practices originally associated with Moriheg's priesthood, preserving ancient divination techniques while adapting them to post-fall realities. The Drukhari largely abandoned divine worship entirely, their focus on individual survival leaving little room for spiritual concerns beyond avoiding Slaanesh's attention. Some maintain small shrines to Khine deep within their private quarters, acknowledging the god of blood as the only deity worthy of even nominal respect in their predatory society. Others practice mockeries of ancient religious rituals, deliberately perverting sacred practices as another form of rebellion against their ancestors' traditions. The Harlequins alone maintain direct connection to a surviving god, their devotion to Segorach defining every aspect of their existence. Their performances preserve the myths of the entire pantheon, ensuring that even gods consumed by Slaanesh remain in cultural memory. Through these enactments, they remind all Aeldari of their shared heritage and the catastrophic consequences of abandoning the wisdom embedded in their ancient traditions. For millennia after the fall, the Aeldari resigned themselves to an existence without divine protection or guidance. The emergence of Unid, the god of the dead, represents the first significant change in this spiritual landscape. Unlike the original pantheon, who existed before the Aeldari and helped shape their development, Unid formed gradually from the collective souls of dead Aeldari preserved within infinity circuits and world spirits. As these souls accumulated over thousands of years, their combined psychic energy began to coalesce into a nascent divine consciousness. The prophecies regarding Unid predate his partial awakening by thousands of years. Farseer Kaisajuras, the anchorite, first recorded the prophecy of the seventh path in the fourth millennium, describing a time when the whispering god would arise from the combined souls of the dead to challenge Slaanesh. This prophecy identified several necessary preconditions, including the gathering of artifacts known as the Crone Swords, and the emergence of a prophet who would walk between worlds of the living and dead. For most of Aeldari history, the conventional interpretation of this prophecy suggested that Unid would only fully awaken after the entire species had perished, their combined souls finally possessing sufficient psychic mass to form a god capable of defeating Slaanesh. This understanding led to a fatalistic acceptance among many Aeldari, who saw their species' extinction as the necessary prelude to potential redemption through Unid's eventual victory over their tormentor. The events surrounding Ivrain's emergence as the emissary of Unid challenged this interpretation. During the tumultuous period of the 13th Black Crusade, the destruction of Cadia created psychic shock waves that resonated throughout the galaxy. These disturbances allowed Ivrain to forge a connection with the partially awakened Unid, demonstrating that the god could manifest a portion of his power before the complete extinction of the Aeldari species. This partial awakening manifested most dramatically in the creation of the Unkarn during the battle for Biel Tan. As the Craftworld suffered catastrophic damage from demonic invasion, the deaths of thousands of Aeldari, and the psychic trauma inflicted on the Infinity Circuit created conditions that allowed Unid to invest a portion of his consciousness into a physical avatar. Unlike the avatars of Kine, which represent fragments of a shattered god, the Unkarn embodies the growing power of a deity still in the process of formation. The Unkarn's physical appearance reflects Unid's nature as a god formed from death itself. Standing taller than even the mightiest Aeldari warriors, its body appears partially skeletal, with sections of exposed bone and sinew intermingled with swirling soul stuff that never fully solidifies into conventional matter. Spectral faces occasionally form and dissolve within this energy field, representing the countless souls contributing to Unid's consciousness. The entity wields a blade formed from crystallized death energy, capable of severing the connection between soul and body with a single touch. In battle, the Unkarn demonstrates abilities that transcend conventional physics. It can dissipate into a cloud of soul energy and reform elsewhere, particularly drawn to locations where death occurs. Weapons pass through its semi-corporeal form without causing permanent damage, while its presence causes intense discomfort to demons and other warp entities who sense in it the potential for their own destruction. Most significantly, the Unkarn can temporarily sever Slaanesh's connection to nearby Aeldari souls, creating a bubble of spiritual protection that allows those within to fight without fear of soul consumption upon death. The current relationship between Unid and the surviving members of the original Pantheon remains ambiguous. Segorach appears to cautiously support the Unari movement, with Harlequin troops occasionally fighting alongside Ivrain's forces, though whether this represents true divine alliance or merely tactical convenience remains unclear. The avatars of Kine show no special reaction to the Unkarn's presence, suggesting that the fragmented war god either cannot perceive or cannot comprehend this new divine entity. The emergence of Unid has sparked theological debates across all Aeldari factions. Some see the god of the dead as the species' last, best hope for survival and eventual resurgence. Others worry that placing faith in an untested deity risks repeating the mistakes that led to the fall, particularly given the Unari's embrace of death, which some traditionalists view as dangerously close to the excess that birthed Slaanesh. The question of whether Unid represents salvation or merely another path to destruction remains fiercely contested in Craftworld councils and Corsair gatherings across the galaxy. What remains certain is that the Aeldari Pantheon, once thought largely destroyed, continues to influence the species' destiny in unexpected ways. Whether through the direct intervention of surviving gods like Segorach, the battlefield manifestations of Kine's fragments, or the emerging potential of Unid, divine forces remain intertwined with Aeldari existence. In a galaxy dominated by humanity's corpse god and the four great powers of chaos, the remnants and successors of the Aeldari Pantheon represent a different kind of divinity, gods born from and dependent upon their mortal followers rather than existing independently of them. The psychic potential of the Aeldari isn't merely an ability, but the fundamental cornerstone upon which their entire civilization rests. Unlike humans, whose psychic talents emerge unpredictably in perhaps 1 in a million individuals, every Aeldari possesses some degree of psychic sensitivity. This universal trait stems from their deliberate creation by the Old Ones, who engineered the Aeldari specifically to wield the energies of the Immaterium with precision and control. Their genetic structure incorporates complex neurological pathways that naturally channel warp energies, making even the least gifted Aeldari more psychically attuned than most human psychers. This innate connection manifests across a spectrum of abilities. At the most basic level, all Aeldari possess a form of limited empathic sense, allowing them to perceive the emotional states of those around them with far greater accuracy than possible through mere observation of body language or vocal tones. This empathic awareness extends to their interactions with the material world itself, granting them the extraordinary reflexes and sensory acuity that make them such formidable warriors and artisans. An Aeldari craftsman doesn't merely observe the materials they work with, but perceives them on a deeper level, intuitively understanding structural properties and potential weaknesses that would require complex scanning equipment for other species to detect. For most Craftworld Aeldari, these basic abilities represent the extent of their active psychic usage. The path system deliberately channels their psychic energy into specific, controlled applications appropriate to their chosen discipline. A warrior on the path of the aspect doesn't consciously manipulate warp energies in battle, but benefits from enhanced reaction times and spatial awareness derived from their innate psychic nature. Similarly, an artisan on the path of the sculptor shapes wraithbone through psychic resonance rather than physical tools, their mental patterns influencing the material's growth and form without requiring formal psychic training. Those who display greater psychic potential typically follow the path of the seer, a discipline that branches into numerous specialized roles based on the individual's particular talents and inclinations. This path begins with fundamental training in psychic control, teaching techniques to safely channel warp energies without risking the dangerous feedback loops that can lead to psychic burnout or, worse, demonic possession. These early lessons emphasize defensive applications, creating mental shields, detecting psychic threats, and maintaining control during moments of emotional stress. As seers progress in their training, they typically specialize in one of several disciplines. Warlocks focus on battlefield applications, learning to project destructive energies, enhance the capabilities of nearby allies, or debilitate enemy forces through targeted psychic attacks. Their powers tend toward the immediate and practical, concussive blasts that can shatter armor, protective fields that deflect incoming fire, or disruptive pulses that temporarily neutralize enemy weapons. Warlocks often serve as psychic support for aspect warrior shrines, using their abilities to complement the specialized combat techniques of their non-psychic counterparts. The training of a warlock incorporates elements of the warrior path, creating battle psychers who can defend themselves in physical combat while channeling their psychic abilities. Their signature weapon, the Witchblade, serves as both focus for their powers and formidable close combat weapon, its psychically reactive material responding to the wielder's mental commands to change shape or energy output as tactical situations demand. In battle, warlocks typically operate in small units called seer councils, combining their psychic strength to achieve effects beyond the capabilities of individual psychers. Spirit seers represent another specialized branch of the seer path, focusing on communication with and control of spirit constructs. Their abilities allow them to interact with the souls preserved within infinity circuits, temporarily transferring these spirits into wraithbone constructs for battlefield deployment. The Spirit Seer's role extends beyond mere technical function. They serve as intermediaries between the living and the dead, maintaining the crucial connection between generations that defines Craftworld society. Their training emphasizes both technical mastery of spirit transfer protocols and the emotional resilience necessary to work with beings caught between life and death. The most powerful and respected practitioners of the psychic arts are the Farseers, seers who have become so immersed in their path that they can no longer leave it. Unlike most paths, which Aeldari traverse for decades or centuries before moving to new experiences, the path of the Farseer tends to consume those who walk it too long. The constant exposure to possible futures, the burden of guiding their people through treacherous fate lines, and the cumulative strain of manipulating warp energies gradually transforms these individuals both mentally and physically. The primary ability that distinguishes Farseers from other seers is their capacity to perceive and manipulate the skein of fate, the complex web of potential futures that extends from each moment. While lesser seers might glimpse isolated fragments of possible outcomes, Farseers perceive vast networks of cause and effect, tracing how minor actions in the present ripple outward to create major consequences in the future. This ability isn't perfect foresight. The skein grows increasingly tangled and uncertain the further one looks ahead, but it provides strategic advantages that few other species can match. A Farseer's divination process typically begins with ritual preparation. The seer enters a meditative state, often enhanced by psychoactive substances derived from wraithbone or crystallized psychic energy. Their consciousness partially detaches from physical reality, allowing them to perceive the immaterial patterns of potential futures without the distraction of present sensory input. Using rune cards, wraithbone dice, or similar divinatory tools, they create physical anchors that help them navigate the overwhelming complexity of the skein, focusing their perception on specific questions or concerns. What they perceive defies simple description. Most Farseers speak of the experience using complex metaphors, threads of possibility woven into tapestries of potential outcomes, branching rivers of causality flowing toward different futures, or crystalline structures where each facet represents a different possibility. The information comes not as clear visual images, but as intuitive understanding, emotional impressions, and fragmented glimpses of critical moments. Interpreting these perceptions requires both technical skill and artistic sensibility, translating abstract patterns into actionable intelligence. The most challenging aspect of farsight isn't perceiving possible futures, but identifying the specific actions necessary to achieve desired outcomes. A Farseer might see 100 potential futures where their craftworld suffers catastrophic damage, but only careful analysis reveals the seemingly insignificant present-day decision that allows them to navigate toward the one future where such damage is avoided. This often requires counterintuitive choices, sacrificing immediate advantages to prevent long-term disasters, or accepting minor losses to secure major victories decades or centuries later. This predictive ability makes Farseers the de facto leaders of Craftworld society. While they rarely hold formal political titles, their guidance shapes all major decisions, from military deployments to economic policies to cultural initiatives. A Farseer's pronouncement that a particular course of action leads to favorable outcomes typically overrides other considerations, even when their reasoning remains obscure to those without their perception of the skein. This authority comes with tremendous psychological burden. Every decision carries the weight of responsibility for countless lives, with the Farseer fully aware of the potential consequences of their choices. The physical cost of farsight manifests through a process known as crystallization. After centuries of channeling warp energies, a Farseer's body begins to transform, their cellular structure gradually converting into a crystalline substance similar to wraithbone, but unique to each individual. This process begins subtly, small patches of skin developing a translucent, gem-like quality, but progressively advances until major portions of their anatomy have transformed. The oldest Farseers often have entirely crystalline limbs, internal organs, or facial features, their bodies becoming living sculptures shaped by the psychic energies they've wielded throughout their lives. This crystallization isn't merely cosmetic, but fundamentally alters how Farseers interact with the material world. Their partially crystalline bodies channel psychic energy more efficiently than flesh, enhancing their powers while simultaneously making them more vulnerable to certain types of damage. A crystallized limb might shatter from impacts that ordinary flesh would merely bruise, requiring specialized repair techniques more akin to the restoration of damaged wraithbone than conventional medical treatment. Most Farseers eventually reach a state where they can no longer sustain their physical forms. their bodies completely transforming into inert crystal that preserves their final form, but not their consciousness. Before reaching this final stage, many Farseers choose to have their spirits transferred into specialized infinity circuits, becoming part of the Craftworld's guiding consciousness. Others undergo a more specialized transition, their crystallized remains incorporated into devices known as seer councils, wraithbone constructs that allow multiple Farseer spirits to combine their perceptive abilities, creating divination engines of unprecedented power and accuracy. These councils represent the accumulated wisdom of dozens of Farseers spanning thousands of years, providing guidance during the most critical junctures in a Craftworld's existence. The Shadowsers of the Harlequin troops represent an entirely different approach to psychic arts, where Craftworld seers focus on divination and controlled application of warp energies. Shadowsers specialize in illusion, misdirection, and psychological manipulation. Their powers allow them to cloud minds, create phantasmal duplicates of themselves or their allies, or induce hallucinatory states in their enemies. These abilities serve both their battlefield role as disruptors and their performative function within Harlequin masks, creating spectacular illusions that enhance the impact of their mythic enactments. The training of a Shadowser incorporates elements of both technical psychic discipline and theatrical performance art. They learn to precisely control the emotional impact of their illusions, crafting psychic constructs that target specific psychological vulnerabilities in their audience or opponents. A Shadowser facing Space Marines might create illusions that trigger latent genetic memories of the Primarchs, momentarily disorienting even these disciplined warriors. Against Imperial Guard, they might conjure phantasms that exploit superstitious fears of witchcraft and Xenos. This psychological precision makes their powers effective even against enemies with significant psychic resistance. The most distinctive tool of the Shadowser is the Kraden hallucinogenic grenade, a weapon that combines chemical compounds with psychic resonators to create effects that bridge the gap between physical and mental influence. When detonated, these devices release clouds of psychoactive particles that make targets more vulnerable to psychic suggestion, while simultaneously broadcasting psychic patterns that the compromised minds interpret as terrifying visions or disorienting sensory experiences. Against unprepared opponents, these weapons can turn disciplined military units into panicked mobs within seconds. The Infinity Circuit represents the most sophisticated application of Aeldari psychic technology, serving as both spiritual repository and Craftworld defense system. Each Craftworld contains a vast network of psycho-conductive channels running throughout its structure, creating a nervous system for the vessel itself. This network serves as haven for the souls of dead Eldari, preserving them from Slaanesh's hunger, while allowing them to continue contributing to their community's welfare. Unlike crude Imperial technologies that treat souls as fuel sources, the Infinity Circuit maintains the individual consciousness of each spirit, though in an altered, dream-like state different from corporeal existence. The physical components of an Infinity Circuit consist primarily of psycho-reactive crystals and wraithbone conduits arranged in complex geometric patterns throughout the Craftworld structure. These materials provide the necessary matrix for disembodied souls to anchor themselves within real space, preventing their dissolution into the warp. The network includes specialized chambers where the living can commune with the dead through ritual and meditation, allowing ancestral wisdom to guide current decisions. In times of extreme danger, the entire circuit can temporarily unify into a singular consciousness, directing the Craftworld's defensive systems with coordinated precision impossible for individual operators to achieve. The relationship between Infinity Circuits and the emergent god Unid represents one of the most significant developments in recent Aeldari history. The traditional understanding held that Unid would only fully awaken after all Aeldari had perished, the combined psychic mass of their preserved souls finally reaching the threshold necessary for divine manifestation. The partial awakening achieved through Ivrain's connection with the Death God suggests alternative possibilities, that Unid might gradually incorporate the souls within Infinity Circuits while some Aeldari still live, or that specific ritual actions might accelerate the process without requiring complete species extinction. This possibility has created significant divisions within Craftworld society. Conservative elements fear that tampering with infinity circuits to hasten Uneed's awakening risks the souls already preserved there, potentially delivering them to Slaanesh should the process fail. More progressive factions argue that the current approach merely delays inevitable extinction, and that controlled risk represents the only viable path to species survival. This debate plays out differently on each Craftworld, with some embracing Aeldari representatives, while others forbid even discussion of their teachings. The most dramatic demonstration of the connection between infinity circuits and Uneed occurred during the battle for Biel-Tan, when demonic invasion severely damaged the Craftworld's soul repository. As thousands of preserved spirits faced dissolution, Ivrain conducted a desperate ritual that channeled this psychic energy toward Uneed rather than allowing it to disperse into the warp where Slaanesh would claim it. This action resulted in the manifestation of the Unkarn, the physical avatar of the partially awakened death god, while permanently altering Biel-Tan's infinity circuit in ways still not fully understood. For most Aeldari, psychic abilities remain simultaneously their greatest strength and most dangerous vulnerability. The same sensitivity that allows them to create wonders of art and technology also exposes them to predation by warp entities, particularly Slaanesh, who hungers specifically for their souls. The various psychic disciplines developed since the fall, whether the rigid path system of the Craftworlds, the soul-binding rituals of the Aeldari, or the divine protection offered to Harlequins by Segorach, all represent different approaches to the same fundamental problem: how to utilize their inherent psychic nature without falling victim to its dangers. The dawning of the 41st millennium found the Aeldari in a precarious position. Once masters of the galaxy, their fragmented remnants now struggled for survival in a universe increasingly hostile to their existence. The formation of the Great Rift in 999 M41, a vast tier in reality stretching from the Eye of Terror to the Eastern Fringe, marked yet another catastrophic shift in their fortunes, comparable in many ways to the fall itself, though on a scale affecting all species rather than just their own. For the Craftworlds, this cosmic upheaval brought both danger and opportunity. Worlds like Ulthwé, long accustomed to operating in the shadow of the Eye of Terror, found themselves better prepared than most for the new reality of weakened barriers between real space and the immaterium. Their Black Guardians, hardened by millennia of fighting chaos incursions, became invaluable advisors to other Craftworlds suddenly facing similar threats. Conversely, more isolated Craftworlds like Alatok found their carefully maintained distance from galactic affairs impossible to preserve as warp storms cut across established routes, forcing encounters with Imperial, Chaos, and Xenos forces where avoidance had previously been possible. The physical impact of the Great Rift on Craftworld travel cannot be overstated. These massive vessels, despite their sophisticated propulsion systems and wraithbone construction, move through real space rather than the warp, making their journeys vulnerable to the newly formed spatial distortions. Several minor Craftworlds were lost entirely, their fate unknown as they attempted passages through regions suddenly consumed by warp storms. Others found themselves trapped in spatial eddies or forced into dangerous detours through territories controlled by hostile powers. Biel-Tan suffered perhaps the most dramatic transformation among the major Craftworlds. Already devastated by demonic invasion during the Gathering Storm, its partial destruction and the subsequent manifestation of the Unkarn left it fundamentally altered. Where once the Craftworld existed as a single unified structure, it now comprises a convoy of smaller vessels surrounding the largest intact fragments of the original world ship. This broken realm, as some Aeldari now call it, continues to function as a cohesive society, but its militant culture has evolved, with many younger Biel-Tan Aeldari embracing Aeldari teachings, while veterans maintain traditional aspects of their warrior culture. Samehand faced different challenges as the Great Rift formed. The Wild Riders found their traditional raiding patterns disrupted by unpredictable warp storms, forcing them to establish more permanent presences in certain regions, rather than maintaining their preferred nomadic operations. This necessity led to increased contact with human frontier worlds, creating complex relationships that ranged from covert alliances against common enemies to bitter territorial disputes. Several same-hand clan chiefs have adapted by developing specialized knowledge of particular imperial sectors, becoming experts in navigating both the physical territories and political landscapes of these regions. For Eandon, long defined by its struggle against the Tyranids and reliance on wraith constructs, the post-Rift era brought unexpected developments. The disruption of several hive fleets by warp storms created breathing room for recovery efforts, allowing the Craftworld to rebuild some of its population through carefully managed birth rates and the recruitment of exodites and corsairs seeking shelter from the increasingly dangerous galaxy. Simultaneously, Ivrain's ability to communicate with the dead offered tantalizing possibilities for the Craftworld's wraith hosts, with some spirit seers cautiously experimenting with Unari techniques to provide greater autonomy and awareness to their ghost warriors. The impact on Komorog proved equally significant, though manifested differently due to the Dark City's location within the webway. The psychic shockwave accompanying the Great Rift's formation caused catastrophic breaches in several of Komorog's dimensional barriers, allowing warp entities to pour into certain districts. Asdrubal Vecht, supreme overlord of the Dark City, responded with characteristic ruthlessness, sealing off affected sections entirely and using the ensuing chaos to eliminate several rival cabals who had been gaining influence. The resource scarcity resulting from these losses intensified competition among surviving Drukhari factions, making their real space raids more frequent and desperate. These raids increasingly targeted not just isolated human worlds, but also Necron tomb worlds stirring to activity, Tiao colonial outposts, and even chaos-held territories, anywhere that might yield the slaves needed to sustain their soul thirst. This operational expansion brought the Drukhari into more frequent conflict with major powers, including several notable clashes with Adeptus Astartes strike forces specifically tasked with countering their predations. The Homunculus Covens have responded by accelerating development of new combat drugs and biological modifications designed to counter space marine physiology, creating an arms race that continues to escalate. The Gathering Storm marked a pivotal series of events for all Aeldari factions, beginning with Eldred Ulthrin's partially successful attempt to fully awaken Unid using the crystallized seers of the Croneworlds, continuing through Ivrain's emergence and the subsequent formation of the Unari, and culminating in the uneasy alliance with Robout Guilliman's Terran Crusade. This period represented the most significant Aeldari intervention in galactic affairs since the Fall. For the first time in millennia, Aeldari actions directly shaped the fate of the galaxy, rather than merely reacting to threats against their dwindling enclaves. The aftermath of these events created complex new relationships between Aeldari factions and the Imperium of Man. Guilliman's pragmatic approach to Xeno's relations, while still fundamentally distrustful, acknowledged the tactical value of coordination against chaos forces. This limited cooperation manifested most visibly during the Plague Wars, where same-hand jetbike squadrons provided crucial reconnaissance for Ultramarines' operations against Death Guard advances, and Ulthwé Farseers shared psychic intelligence regarding Nurgle's strategic objectives. These tentative alliances remain fragile and contested on both sides. Within the Imperium, conservative elements view any cooperation with Xenos as dangerous heresy, while among the Aeldari, many see humans as primitive, unreliable allies at best and existential threats at worst. The relationship functions primarily through individual connections rather than formal diplomatic channels. A particular autarch might coordinate with a specific Imperial commander based on personal trust established through shared battlefield experiences, while official Imperial policy continues to classify all Aeldari as hostile Xenos. The psychic awakening that followed the Great Rift's formation had profound implications for the Aeldari, whose innate psychic sensitivity made them experience these events with particular intensity. On Craftworlds, previously latent abilities manifested in individuals who would not traditionally have followed the path of the seer, creating challenges for the established training systems. Ulthwé, with its disproportionate psyker population, established emergency protocols to handle this surge, sending experienced seers to other craftworlds to assist with the sudden influx of untrained psychics. Among the Drukhari, the psychic awakening created a dangerous crisis. Their carefully maintained psychic atrophy, developed over millennia to avoid attracting Slaanesh's attention, began to reverse in some individuals, particularly those with ancestral connections to craftworld bloodlines. Komorog's strict prohibitions against unsanctioned psychers led to purges as homunculi dissected awakened individuals, seeking physiological methods to suppress these emerging abilities. Some affected Drukhari fled to the Unari, whose protection from Slaanesh offered a path to safely develop these abilities, creating a new source of tension between the factions. The most significant military engagements involving the Aeldari during this period occurred across multiple fronts, reflecting their dispersed nature and diverse agendas. The War of Beasts on Vigilis saw same-hand forces initially fighting against Imperial defenders before shifting to target Chaos and Orc forces as the strategic situation evolved. Their involvement appeared contradictory to human observers, but followed a consistent internal logic. The Farseers had identified specific outcome threads, requiring precisely timed interventions to avoid catastrophic futures visible only to their divination. The Battle of the Stardied Nexus represented another major engagement, with Craftworld Aeldari committing significant forces to defend this critical waterway from Death Guard attacks. This seemingly altruistic action actually served long-term Aeldari interests by preventing the Nexus from falling to chaos, which seers had determined would create a new warp storm that would threaten several maiden worlds. The Tiao, unaware of these motivations, interpreted the assistance according to their own philosophical framework, categorizing the Aeldari as potential converts to the greater good rather than understanding their actual objectives. Perhaps most consequential was the Shadow Conclave of Ulthwé, where Eldred Ulthrin gathered representatives from 7 major craftworlds to coordinate a response to the prophesied return of the Silent King. The resulting strategy involved a series of apparently disconnected actions across dozens of systems: the assassination of specific Imperial officials, the destruction of certain Necron artifacts, and the seeding of Wraithbone constructs at key stellar conjunctions. These operations, incomprehensible to outside observers, represented a complex fate weaving intended to constrain the Silent King's potential actions without triggering direct confrontation with the fully awakened Necron Empire. The relationship between the Aeldari and humanity remains fundamentally shaped by mutual incomprehension despite thousands of years of interaction. To the Imperium, the Aeldari appear as capricious, arrogant Xenos whose interventions follow no discernible pattern of alliance or enmity. From the Aeldari perspective, humans represent a crude, psychically immature species whose sheer numbers and technological capabilities make them simultaneously useful tools and dangerous rivals. The fundamental difference in lifespan, with individual Aeldari often outliving dozens of human generations, creates a temporal disconnect that further complicates meaningful diplomacy. This relationship varies significantly between Imperial factions. The Ordo Xenos maintains extensive files on known craftworlds and major Aeldari personalities, with some Inquisitors developing nuanced understandings of their psychology and motivations. Certain rogue traders maintain commercial relationships with craftworlds, exchanging rare materials or artifacts for Xenos technologies that skirt the boundaries of Imperial legality. Conversely, many Space Marine chapters hold ancestral grudges against specific craftworlds based on past conflicts, pursuing vendettas that span centuries regardless of strategic context. The Aeldari view different human factions with equally varied perspectives. Many Farseers consider the Adeptus Mechanicus particularly dangerous due to their tendency to disrupt tomb worlds and activate ancient technologies beyond their comprehension. The Imperial Navy represents a significant tactical concern due to its ability to project power across interstellar distances, while the Astra Militarum's numbers make them a statistical threat despite individual human weakness. The Adeptus Astartes earn a measure of reluctant respect for their combat prowess, with aspect warriors occasionally developing professional appreciation for space marines they've encountered in battle. Looking toward possible futures, the Aeldari face several potential paths, each fraught with uncertainty. The extinction scenario remains the default trajectory, a slow dwindling of population across all factions as attrition claims more lives than their low birth rates can replace. This path ends with the last Aeldari souls joining Unid, potentially empowering the god of the dead sufficiently to challenge Slaanesh, but offering no continuation for the species itself. Many conservative Craftworld elders have accepted this fate, focusing on extending their decline as long as possible while preserving cultural achievements for whatever species might follow them. The Unari offer an alternative vision centered on Unid's premature awakening through the gathering of the Crone Swords. This path promises potential liberation from Slaanesh's soul hunger, allowing Aeldari to live and die without the spiritual constraints that have defined post-fall existence. If successful, this could enable cultural revitalization and population growth, particularly if it allows reintegration of the disparate factions. However, the risks are substantial. Failure could deliver countless souls directly to Slaanesh, while success might create unforeseen consequences given Unid's nature as a god of death rather than rebirth. A third possibility involves adaptation through hybridization, already evident in certain Corsair fleets, where Aeldari interact more freely with other species. Though cultural taboos against genetic mixing remain strong, the emergence of individuals with mixed heritage along the fringes of Aeldari society suggests this boundary is not absolute. Some radical thinkers propose that the species' future might lie in selective incorporation of traits from compatible races, preserving essential Aeldari characteristics while introducing greater adaptability and reproductive viability. This path faces fierce resistance from traditionalists, but gains traction among younger generations, particularly those who have fought alongside other species against common threats. The most optimistic scenario involves genuine renaissance, the reclamation of former Aeldari worlds, and the establishment of new societies that transcend the limitations of post-fall existence without repeating its mistakes. This would require not just freedom from Slaanesh's hunger, but a fundamental cultural evolution, developing new social structures that channel Aeldari intensity constructively without either the rigid constraints of the path system or the destructive excess that led to the fall. Whether such a transformation is possible remains hotly debated, with proponents pointing to the unprecedented changes already unfolding in the wake of the Great Rift. As the era Indomitus unfolds, the Aeldari continue their ancient dance of survival, adaptation, and manipulation. Their actions, inscrutable to other species, follow patterns visible only through the lens of farsight and millennial planning. Whether they represent the last generation of a dying species or the founders of a new Aeldari future remains written only in the shifting skeins of fate, their destiny, like their past, entirely of their own making. The wars of the 41st millennium have forced all Aeldari factions to confront uncomfortable truths about their circumstances. No longer can they operate as though the galaxy revolves around their concerns, yet neither can they withdraw from its conflicts without risking extinction. In this twilight age, they must balance preservation of their ancient heritage with the necessity of change, maintaining what makes them uniquely Aeldari while adapting to a universe that has moved on without them. Their story, which began in the fires of the war in heaven, continues toward an uncertain conclusion, perhaps extinction, perhaps transformation, but certainly defined by the same pride, artistry, and tragic grandeur that has characterized their long journey through the stars.